Sword of Coming Chapter 862. On Tuyue Mountain, except for the monks and all kinds of mountain guardians, all the dead have been refined by the great demon culprit, so every time the mountain guard formation is destroyed and reopened, it is an invisible the time flowed back for a year, which made all the concealment techniques and escape methods of the monster monks in the mountains seem meaningless. After each round of questioning the sword by the 5 swordsmen of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the culprit of the big demon was all the monks of the monster race will show up in place, but the acupoint aura and body magic weapons will not follow their footsteps to restore to their original state. It's like a group of poor passers-by walking on the banks of the long river of time. They must go through storms, bury their heads and constantly change the time ferry, hurting their feet little by little, and then retreat to the place inexplicably and have to face it. Greater despair is to face the sword light that obscures the sky. The previous 5 sword repairmen, each time they asked the sword to support Yueshan together, most of the hidden officials were responsible for opening the mountain with their swords, and took the lead in cutting through the mountain protection formation of the long river of time. The remaining 4 sword repairers were responsible for killing the monsters and at the same time. However, the sword aura and the vast sword intent consumed the aura and the luck of the mountains and waters that a mountain of Tuyue had accumulated for thousands of years, finally changing the time and place. Qin Pingyan alone handed out a full 3,000 swords. The pioneer disciple of the great ancestor of the wild, the culprit of the great demon was drawn from the center of the forehead and the eyebrow, and was slashed in half by the sword light. Because Qin Pingyan handed his sword too fast, he cut to the culprit in yellow clothes standing on the top of the mountain again and again. But this big demon was so arrogant that he remained motionless all the time, letting the sword light cut his head. Is like being chopped in half, and a golden light in the center is not scattered, like a long golden river that separates and confronts the 2 peaks. The current situation of this ascendant peak great demon is so similar to those 2 Swordchi great walls. Probably this is an alternative gift deliberately made by the last hermit. The monks of the Jade Innocent Realm in the mountains are already dead, let alone those who follow them to climb the mountain to visit Tuyue Mountain. At the moment there are only 3 great monsters in the fairyland, either relying on a time-consuming natal spell, or struggling to kill the natal magic weapon and thousand-year Taoism again and again, still struggling to support. 6 of the Yupu realm monster monks who participated in the discussion here were molded for 8 lifetimes. How could they not believe that they would be made dumplings in Tuyue Mountain? Escape? Where can I escape? Going outside of Tuyue Mountain, losing the protection of the formation of the long river of time, facing the sword light of those ascending sword repairs? What's more, Tuyueshan's formation can not only isolate the sword light, but also be a natural prison for besieging the monks of the monster race, making the monks of the monster race succumbing to the ground every day. After all, who can imagine that it will be the most stable in the wild world? In the place, Qi was hit by a questioning sword. The old sword fairy Qi Tingji with lettering on the head of the city is best at helping people and soldiers get on the road. In the past, Lu Ji, who together with Xiao Xing called the Great Wall of Sword Qi fierce, seemed to have advanced swordsmanship. Ning Yao, the first person in the colorful world, she has entered the Ascendant Realm earlier than the Barren World Co-Lord, whose status is roughly equal today. There is also a man who jumped out from nowhere. He called himself a criminal officer, and was an undoubtedly ascended sword repairman. Therefore, in the wild places or in their own patriarch hall, or similar to the Qingshan Temple of Daoist, or in some hidden and forbidden landscapes and secrets, a series of natal lamps have been lit to help the monks reborn and escape death. Just practice can start again, but the previous realm has disappeared, and the natal lamp can indeed extend life, but the road to climb in the future will be disgusted by the road in the future. According to legend, the monk who lit the natal lamp, before entering the 5 realms, the demons encountered were beyond imagination. Just like the concealed potential of Zhongtu Shenzhou, such a promising young man of heaven, if he hadn't capsized in the gutter of Luzhou in Beiju, he would have great hope of becoming a young man with his potential as a monkhood. One of 10 alternates. The culprit in the yellow clothes doesn't care about the life or death of those monster monks, and they don't have any pity for them as if they were dying under their noses. Life is like an ant, like drowning in a heavy rain of sword energy. The culprit glanced at the sword held by Qin Pingyan. The sword slashed at Yueshan so many times that the sword's edge did not show any signs of damage. On the contrary, it became more and more unmatched. The culprit remembered the vision of heaven and earth brought by this long sword, and thought of those pages of the old almanac that were only passed on by word of mouth, and roughly guessed the roots and feet of the sword, smiled and said, "It's a good fate I can get lucky." The sword recognizes the master, and of course his life is hard enough to catch the sword and never degenerate into a puppet. Since ancient times, immortal soldiers have their own spiritual heritage, just like a rebellious existence. The monks' dispositions are often in line with them, and they are often affected by their own refinement of the immortal soldiers. More and more indifferent, and if there is a slight deviation on the road, it will quietly lead the master to a fork in the road. In the end, the monk can't bear it, and the fairy will be able to escape from the cage and regain freedom, regardless of those years old. The innate treasure is the acquired refining of the treasures of heaven, material and earth, and step by step to the rank of immortal soldiers. This is where the common root of immortal soldiers in the world lies: no master. So every great monk who has reached the 14th realm has a very subtle attitude towards the fairy soldiers, and it is by no means as simple as the more the better. Many monks in the upper 5 realms close their lives and deaths. Once the corpse is unfortunately dismantled, it is often a flash of light. Even the immortal soldiers of the great refinement will not follow the monks to disintegrate, but will still return to the world and then hide in a certain place. Get up and wait for the fate of the next master. The more the top big sect, the less will it deliberately prevent those immortal soldiers from leaving, because even if they are forced to stay, they will only bring many inexplicable disasters to the mountain, and the gains outweigh the losses. Otherwise, due to the preciousness of the fairy soldiers, it has long been searched by several mountain monks in the world, and all attribution has been established as a rule. There are more than 300 orifice acupoints in the world of humans. What is the difficulty of the Qi Palace? Why is there no great monk who is full of great immortal soldiers in the Qi Palace? Like the precious wooden box containing 8 long swords, Lu Chen said to lend it to Lu Ji. Bai, besides the poem in his heart, only has a fairy sword Tai Bai as the object of attack. In addition to his own Dao Fa, Yu Dou also only had the fairy sword named Dao Zong. And the old throne in the wild world, once every one of them was aspiring to reach the top, and the 14 realms of the Dao before attacking the vast world, they will never stare at the so-called mountain treasures, but the landscape and dynasty luck. Invisible virtual things. The culprit smiled and asked. The hidden officer handed out 3,000 swords one after another. Are you tired? Should I pay the courtesy? Qin Pingon, wearing a lotus crown, barefoot in a blue shirt and a sword in one hand, stands in the heaven and earth. Every time he breathed out, there were purple and golden air lingering around his face. For the 3-headed lingering fairy cultivator of the fairyland monster, the luck of misfortune is that the 4 sword repairmen outside the hermit have swam far away with their swords. It seems that they are going to soar to a bright moon? Plus the culprit said to pay the courtesy. Does it mean that from this moment the situation on both sides will start to reverse? Qin Pingon ignored the culprit's inquiry and just looked around. Aside from thousands of miles of mountains and rivers, there are many demonic monks hiding everywhere, mostly from the vassal sect of Tuyue Mountain. Do you think you get the moon first when you get close to the water tower? So like watching theaters. Mind movement is a vision of heaven and earth that arises at will. I saw a sea of clouds surging in the sky, and just below the sea of clouds is a monster mountain. The white clouds finally manifested a huge white palm like jade from the sea of clouds. Protruding down from the middle, the palm lines as large as mountains are like rivers and streams, full of green and faint lotus, budding, swaying, and there is bright moonlight, scattered among the lotus ponds. Suddenly, numerous crystal-clear snow-white lotuses bloomed. Qin Pingan's surgical method was clearly stealing the teacher from the credit month, and the credit month was imitating the master of the Lotus Temple at the time. It was carried out by Qin Pingan. It looks like 7 or 8 points, and the gods still have 4 or 5 points. The main culprit of the big demon doesn't care about the survival of that mountain. He stretched out his hand, thunder and lightning were pure, condensing a line, and finally manifested a gilded spear, refined from the corpse of an ancient god, belonging to the culprit. One of a handful of key zombies. From the top of Tuyue Mountain, it breaks through the air and draws a straight long line, like a long rainbow shining through the sun, dazzling. Qin Pingon frowned slightly, raising his foot and moving one step across. On the side of Xianxia City, Qin Pingan's Taoist style completely ignored those attacking techniques from beginning to end. The light brought by the golden spear was nailed from the shoulder of Xing Faxiang. Compared with Qin Pingan's 10,000-foot portrait, this golden light drawn by the long spear is as thin as a sewing cord, straight and sword-like. One end is in Tuyue Mountain, and the other end is more than 100 miles deep into the earth. It is enshrined by a sneaky head of Tuyue Mountain which is hidden in the underground. It is holding a white jade bowl-shaped treasure, and suddenly appears a real body, half a dragon and half dragon. In his posture he swallowed the white bowl that received the golden thread into his abdomen in one bite, and then began to swiftly move horizontally with his own life escape method. The ground vibrated endlessly and thunder bursts. The golden thread resembled a blade, and began to incline the shoulders of Qin Pingan's Faxiang, arousing a rough sound like a knife-carved gold stone, sputtering countless sparks. Qin Pingan stretched out and grabbed the long golden thread that pierced his shoulders, but he could not cut it off. Lu Chen's previous questioning was fruitless, and he has been a little absent-minded. Spirit explained to Qin Pingan with the voice of his heart. Because you carry the real name of the great demon on your body, you have become a cumbersome, and you have never really fallen into the poor state of the empty boat. Let's talk about the way to crack. I never thought that without waiting for Lu Chen's guidance, Qin Pingan had already strode horizontally and deliberately did not continue to use his sword to open the mountain, leaving the great demon culprit idle first. Wanzhang Faxiang then moved in the opposite direction to the Tuyueshan Mountain Protector enshrinement, as if to dislike it too much, so he simply helped it to cut open the shoulders of its own Faxiang. Lu Chen, an outsider lying in the Lotus Dojo, felt a pain for Qin Pingan. At the same time he stretched out his hand and grabbed the sword, and then he took the long sword Yeo out of its sheath. After holding it in his right hand, Yeo suddenly became in line with the height of the law. He turned around and nailed a long sword straight into the ground, twisting his wrist. Wrapped the long golden thread around his arm, and began to drag the really big underground monster and kept moving closer to him. The earth, mountains and rivers, which were originally immersed by the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the luck of mountains and waters for thousands of years, became extremely solid, suddenly soft and muddy. The real body of the monster race under the ground seemed to be aware of the line of life and death, and displayed the magical powers of his life, and continuously connected with Tuyue Mountain Shenzhen, then crazily twisted his body and tried to run backwards. On the ground, a ravine that stretched for dozens of miles and more than 100 miles continued to spread. In the end, the behemoth, half-dragon and half-dragon, was severely dragged out from under the ground by Qin Pingan, and then dragged little by little towards the nightward tour of the sharp-edged sword. During the period, this monster clan's true body kept jumping and arching its back vigorously. Many mountains were flattened by the huge body, or smashed into huge valleys. Lu Chen sat up and looked down at the picture scroll. This is not fishing anymore. If a person drags a big fish on the shore, he has no magic skills, just competing with brute force. As a result, the genus of the dragon, which was thousands of feet long, was cut away from the head by a long sword that was nailed to the spot and split into two on the spot. Tit for tit. As for why this Tuyue Mountain enshrinement does not take away its true body, part of the reason is that it swallows the gold thread. The culprit of the big demon seems to have intentionally kept it in its true body posture. Moreover, Qin Pingan sacrificed the caged bird and Jing Zhongyue at the same time. No more, no less, a small world was born, and it happened to cover the opponent's body with hundreds of thousands of flying swords densely clustered together. Lu Xun was amazed, and the hidden official and the people were fighting, and it was indeed straightforward. No wonder they can take advantage of Cao Si's side. When the Tuyue Mountain was enshrined and divided, Qin Pingan held a sword in his left hand and continued to hand out a sword toward Tuyue Mountain. After the sword opened the mountain, the gold thread wrapped around Qin Pingan's arm disappeared, and another golden spear appeared in the hands of the culprit. Lu Xun reminded, the culprit is trying to determine the distribution of the real names of the big monsters on your body. Be careful. Qin Pingan's Faxiang dissipated from the place and appeared thousands of miles away. He never thought that the long golden line would follow him like a shadow. This time it was directly nailed to Faxiang's heart. Qin Pingan reached out and grabbed the long line and just tore it to pieces, losing his tenacity. The first time he threw it out, Qin Pingan knew something was wrong, but from the top of Tuyue Mountain, like a golden flower blooming, a spear in the hands of the great demon culprit, unexpectedly threw out thousands of rays at the same time. so fast even Qin Pingon couldn't avoid it. Those golden long lines carried the real name of the great demon within the form, stirring circles of golden ripples. To be the first disciple of the great savage ancestor, the culprit's cultivation qualifications will certainly not be bad. After joining the Dao Tuyue mountain, although it can only increase the path of the Ascension realm year after year, it is equivalent to completely losing the possibility of the 14 realms. But after cultivating the Tao for thousands of years, the so-called peak that was stagnating in the Ascendant realm is indeed the peak worthy of the name. Qin Pingon slashed towards Tuyueshan with a sword, causing the culprit to die again, and the long golden thread entwining the image disappeared. Day and night are reversed and the darkness is heavy. The culprit looked up and saw a complicated sword formation with hundreds of thousands of flying swords. The floating sword array slowly pressed down towards the world. This scene is like falling from the sky. The culprit put together, chanting Tao Ju silently, and the other hand was lifted up. The lines on the palm of the palm were flowing and a colorful mirror appeared. Raising the hand gently, the mirror rose, facing the sword formation that fell from the sky. Lucian was full of emotion. Good and the weather is really good. The culprit is tantamount to being in a one-corner place, unleashing the power of heaven and earth. Of course, Qin Pingon has the same profound intentions. In fact, in Lu Chen's view, I am afraid that this is an incomparable move in the world, and it is a good thing to use other mountains to attack Jade. The flying sword of Jing Zhongyue. The sword seems to be thrown out of thin air from the emptiness, like a sound of autumn, containing a powerful atmosphere. Qin Pingon is practicing both sword and sword. A swordsmanship that has long been familiar to Qin Pingon. While traveling all the way, I separated my mind and looked at the Guangqianjian's high built by Lu Xun in Yushu City, then searched for memory in his mind and visualized the sword from a distance. Qin Pingon used all the swordsmanship, sword intent and kendo seen in the Great Wall of Qi to be used for his own use. In the previous 3,000 swords he practiced swords one by one. Different swordsmanship, different sword intent, but Qin Pingon handed out the same trail of opening a mountain. As for now, 2 natal flying swords have been sacrificed, and Tuyue Mountain is regarded as the largest dragon-cutting stone in the world, used to sharpen the avenue and edge of the 2 natal flying swords. The fate of the bird in the flying sword cage is an extremely rare self-contained small world, and the size of the world is not only linked to the level of the sword repair realm, but actually also related to the size of Qin Ping's heart. What you see, what you think in your heart, is an unknowable expansion of the outside world. Among them, Qin Pingon was actually looking for a second kind of natal supernatural power, just like the Mountain of Princes can exist in the 5 sacred mountains. As for the second natal flying sword, the number of flying swords depends on the rising of the bright moon at the bottom of the well into the well and finally from the head to the outside of the well. The culprit stepped on a Tuyue mountain, and there was another golden spear in his hand. In addition, the culprit Yin came out of his body, reappearing the outer body of the Yang god, plus a Dharma image standing behind the true body. Beside the Yin god who was the culprit of the big demon, a woman appeared out of thin air. Her face was vague, her figure was graceful, and her sleeves were erratic. She seemed to be the legendary maid on the river, spiritual and most divine. Yang Shen is outside, holding a flame sledgehammer, reflecting the face of the great demon like an ancient fire deity. It seems that the spiritual path of the culprit is also the destiny that refining the 5 elements. The 5 elements belong to the mountain of Tuyue, the golden spear in the hands of the real body, the maiden of the spirit next to the Yin god, and the fire sledgehammer in the hands of the body outside. As for the wood objects, they are still invisible. Most of them use their sources to continuously generate spiritual energy to help the culprit support the use of magical powers. And Tuyue Mountain is undoubtedly the root of the avenue, so that the 5 great refining natal creatures, once cut open by the sword, will be brand new year after year, without worrying about breaking and breaking. If it weren't for the cause of harmony, one had to pay the price of cessation in practice, then as long as the culprit made every effort and succeeded in entering the 14th realm, if you could carry Tuyue Mountain and move around in the wild world at will, such a 14 realm, it is estimated that everyone will have a headache. Therefore, the culprit of the great demon can be roughly regarded as a pseudo-14 realm monk who is well-suited and well-placed. Qin Pingon glanced into the distance and roughly saw the true boundary of Tuyue Mountain, which was about 6,000 miles in radius. This means that within these 6,000 miles, the culprit of the big demon is unobstructed. The reason why he stayed in the place of the abbot on the top of the mountain and was chopped with 3,000 swords while standing still is of course because he feels that there is less aura in the mountain. Point. On the way of life, Qin Pingon couldn't be more familiar with people asking swords and fists. As for the number of pure fighting methods on the mountain, relatively speaking, it was indeed a bit less. So it is a caged bird. The world encompasses 6,000 miles of mountains and rivers. On the back of Tuyue Mountain, a Taoist man in Xingyi appeared, standing on top of a 5-colored mountain holding a watermark. Previously won many water transports in the dragging river, making this water seal the first to become the treasure of the immortal soldiers among Qin Ping's 5 great refining destinies. In addition, there is a paperless book on the waist hanging from the waist, which is the Taoist art of praying for rain. In this way it is natural to pray for rain. There was a majestic rain over Tuyue Mountain, and every drop of rain contained both boxing and sword intent. Behind Qin Pingan's Taoist Dharma, the reborn Dharma is a suspended golden god, with a fire dragon entangled in each arm, holding a sword fairy flag and offering a magical seal in the palm of one hand, and the golden is slowly supporting it 5 thunder spell seals, thunder spell clusters, thousands of good fortune in one palm. Qin Pingan shook his sleeves, and a bronze pagoda shaped like a white jade Beijing took root on the ground where the god's golden body fell. It suddenly became sacred on the 12th floor of the 5 cities, and it was extremely high. This object was originally an ancient relic. It was given to the disciple of Tuyueshan Guanmen as a gift by the Lord of the Lotus Nunnery as a meeting ceremony. In fact, it used to be the treasure of the Jade Talisman Palace. The old palace lord was once the best in the world. One of the several masters of Fuluo, who was as famous as the Fuluo Zhou Xian of the Haoran world in his early years, secretly refined this pagoda. In order to conceal people, he deliberately built the bronze pagoda as a blind method. Unexpectedly, a young Taoist boy rode a bull to pass the pass and travel. In the wild world, except for a finger at the Hall of Valor, knocked an old thrown big monster to the bottom, actually still in place, raising his sleeves as if to slap gently. As a result, the Jade Talisman Palace that was a few million miles away, the old palace lord in retreat, together with a small cave sky, was shot to pieces on the spot, almost completely dead and lost his real skin. The old monk in the Ascension realm became a ghost in the fairy realm, but it was the bronze pagoda. Daoist seemed to be merciful. He never destroyed this thing and was finally succeeded by the master of the Lotus Nunnery. He only dared to study the Taoist meaning of the Jade Talisman Palace. I still dare not refining it casually into a destiny. I guess it feels hot, worrying that one day the Taoist ancestor will miss it and another slap will fall away. When the time comes, the same round of bright moon will be smashed together. A fairy soldier lost a place of cultivation. In the end, the lord of the Lotus Nunnery had no good intentions and cheated Li Zhen. Sure enough, Li Zhen was on the battlefield of the Great Wall of Sword Qi and he was killed by Qin Pingan, who was not a hermit in Jianxiu at the time. Lu Qin glanced at the Dharma seal, holding his forehead speechless. In the early years in jail, with the help of the sewing man twisting the core, the Luman seal on this mountain was transferred from the mountain temple to a mountain top on the palm of the hand. The base of the French seal was a 16-character insect bird seal. Collect 5 thunders, total perseverance. Cut the 5 leeks, cardinal of heaven and earth. The other 4 sides have no characters in the drawing, depicting the 9 closed eyes gods, Lei Jun Electric Mother, Rain Master Fengshen, Yunli Lingjiang and Huobu Tianguan, all of which are the gods who are part of the heavenly movement in the ancient heaven. There are a total of 36 gods, but they have not yet opened the eyes of the sky, as if they were in a state of sleep with no clergy. Qin Pingan put his fingers together and began to finish the portraits of those ancient gods. The third head teacher of Bai Yujing used the ancient people's cloud, when drinking in the Jiuquan sect's shop, to express his feelings. The school book is like sweeping leaves. Lu Qin temporarily borrowed a 14-level Taoist method to Qin Pingan, and he was very sincere. It was not only a realm but also a knowledge. Therefore, as long as Qin Ping was willing and with his heart and mind, he could freely search for Lu Chen's certain restrictions. All the mental expressions are like a boat that is not tied, a carefree and unobstructed escape, visiting a sea of study that is almost endless, but ultimately surrounded by heaven. Only this way Qin Pingan was more restrained, and it was not until this moment that he sacrificed this seal, drawing amulets for those gods like an eye-opener. Lu Xian held back for a long time before he looked a little regretful and said slowly, "If you engraved the 4-character Sanshin Jiuho, it would be fine." Lu Xian quickly added a sentence and said cheerfully, "Of course the imprint of the current heavenly stamp has a better meaning." It turned out that when Qin Pingon got it, the seal was like being cut off by someone else. Later, Qin Pingon used a talisman to open the mountain in the original alchemy book, and Qin Pingon went the other way and painted the talisman. Can be described as retrograde and reverse application, not written in any kind of talisman seal script in the world, but the most familiar and expert handwriting, respectively engraved 4 characters. The order is nailing evil Shin Lu. Therefore, the final completion of the Lu Man Yin seal in Tianzi section is Lu Qinji Ling. The spiritual image of the fire-type golden body god, holding up the 5 thunder seals in one hand, hung high above the sky in an instant. The golden body then pierced the sword fairy flag into the imitated white jade capital, like a big stick. The sword fairy hidden by the 18 flags is as small as a dust. After walking out of the place of the host, they are suddenly as tall as ordinary people, like 18 comets blasting into the distance, flying out of the city and swords in all directions. Traveling far with 18 fireflies within the jurisdiction of Zhou Xian with a radius of 6,000 miles of mountains and rivers, strangling with the sword the remaining monster monks who thought they were hiding, but actually had traces to follow. Wait until the 36 deities of the Dharma seal were all put on by Qin Pingon. They left the 5 thunder Dharma seal as if they were reborn. Like the heaven that has collapsed 10,000 years ago, at this moment, the backbone is complemented and order is restored, making the small world of caged birds more and more fit the avenue without any omissions. But Lu Qian didn't know why. The closer he was to the oneness, the more he felt that he was far away from the truth of the oneness. Ming Lu Qian saw in his eyes, it was like a prototype that more and more resembled the old heavenly court. But with a Taoist heart, Lu Qian became more and more regretful and lost. Because the master appeared in by Yujing for the last time, he had talked to Lu Qinyan and everything he thought was out of the ordinary. The 2 14th realm great monks let go of their hands and feet, and apart from the ascendant realm, they don't need to expect to help. It is difficult for anyone to intervene in it. A fairyland demon clan chi training man, and the yellow-clothed culprit pleaded bitterly, "Ancestor, help. All life-saving spells and magic weapons have been exhausted." It had to show its true body. It was a crimson centipede that was as long as a rolling mountain range around a section of Tuyue Mountain, raised its huge head and prayed for shelter from the culprit on the mountain. The other 2 big demon immortals, one shrunk like a mustard seed, and the other leaning on the natal robe that can travel time and water, also began to call for help with the culprit. In the Tuyue Mountain, there are 3 big monsters in the Fairyland 6 Jade Pu realms, plus the immortal monk. The 5 sword repairmen of the Great Wall of Sword Qi traveled here together, outside of the ascendant realm of Xiandan City, Wuxia. This time the slashing of the Suoyu Mountain together seemed to be regarded as the ascendant realm of sword cutting. Qin Pingon glanced at Tuyue Mountain, which now looks like an empty shell. Is like that brilliant or perhaps even earlier carefulness, deliberately leaving only the culprit here waiting for the sword. As for who is here to ask the sword, it doesn't matter. The culprit seemed to be stunned. It was only at this moment that he could vomit quickly. He squinted and said with a smile, "Qin Pingon, have you forgotten one thing? You seem to be in harmony with you now. Are you really a sage to accompany a Confucian temple? If you fight for your life, can you protect the half of the city? If I remember correctly, the one that caused you to be scolded the most was when the Summer Palace ordered to block Qingtu Xianxia's self-sacrifice and save others. Why, it's your turn, you can't stand it. Officer, just want to engrave in the city to prove his worthy sword repair status?" Lu Qian became serious. This guy is not a bluff. Qin Pingon handed out a sword and said to Lu Qian in his heart, "It doesn't matter. Cut to death the peak of the Ascension realm." The biggest depressed culprit was actually a trivial matter. It was the young hidden official of this dog day. This time he asked Jian Tuo Yueshan from beginning to end. He didn't say a word to himself. Any ship in the world will have ballast stones. Qin Pingon joined the half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Before he met his senior brother Cui Yang and returned to his hometown strangely. In fact, in order to survive more years, he first stripped out sadness, fatigue, hatred, anger. It was equivalent to stripping out almost everything. In the end, even more emotions were picked out one by one, just to be able to take care of half of the sword energy for longer. even if it was only 1 year, 1 month, or even one more day. This is why in Dali capital Qin Pinyin, who walked out of the mirror and appeared in a purely divine posture, is so powerful. Because of Qin Pingan's human nature at that time, he was incomplete. And Qin Pingan's price may only be known after the sacrament of tracing the origin through that long journey. Ning Yao doesn't know, husband doesn't know, students and disciples don't know. While Qin Pingan stayed in half of the Great Wall of Jianqi, the biggest ballast stone was a kind of character that Qin Pingan cherished the most in his life. It's called hope. In the northernmost boundary of the wild world, under the southern land of the two Swordqi Great Walls, a breath of ancient times appeared in the extreme depths. The earth cracks. A high-ranking who slept soundly here for thousands of years began to wake up with his eyes open. First broke through the ground, the flying dust quickly dispersed, and an empty armored body appeared, with only a pair of golden eyes staring at the high city tens of thousands of miles away. Then there was a constant divinity, condensed from all over the wild world, snow-white armor, huge body, modeled monuments and blazing flames. It reached out and held down the visor, leaving only its golden eyes, and slowly got up holding a huge blade. In the words of the ancient gods, it slowly said, "The one who is fortunate enough to see the blade is unfortunate." On the other side of Tuyue Mountain, Qin Pingan just kept handing swords with Tuyue Mountain, and at the same time battling the culprit. Zhou Xian was speechless, suddenly got up and then turned his head, jumping and looking towards the northernmost side, muttering, "This old sword fairy, why don't you speak credibility?" Qin Pingan smiled heartily. "It's not the first time anyway. In the half of the Great Wall of Swordqi where no one should have appeared, an old man who was supposed to be the least supposed to show up appeared. After holding one hand and rubbing his chin with the other, he raised his head and looked at the who came to the Great Wall of Swordqi after a step and said, 'Everyone treats himself as invincible.'" The old man stretched out his hand casually, and all the sword intent remaining in the Great Wall of Swordqi for thousands of years, if received an edict, even if some seemed to be not listening, and reluctantly he had to come obediently and finally in the hands of this old sword repairman. Condensed into a sword, the old man weighed it, the weight was acceptable, and it was just an understatement towards the ancient high-ranking god sweeping a sword. After a sword, the world is quiet. The old man nodded to himself as if he was in a relationship with all sword repairs within 10,000 years, and said the simplest truth. "See you, this is swordsmanship." Sword of Coming Chapter 863. As one of the sages who accompanied the Confucian temple, the old master He was responsible for looking after the site of the Great Wall of Jianqi. He immediately fell from the sky and hovered in the wind outside the half of the Great Wall of Jianqi. By the way, both feet do not set foot on the top of the city, and bowed to the oldest sword repairman in the world and respectfully said, "Junior He, see the old sword fairy." The nickname of the old sword Immortal was first picked up by Aoliang for help. Later the local sword repairman of the Great Wall of Swordqi shouted like this. With the return of sword repairs from all continents, he was used to the respectful name Qin Qingdu. A convention thing. Qin Qing just looked at Tuyue Mountain and ignored the greeting of a sage of the Confucian temple. He, who was left hanging aside like this, didn't bother. If the boss sword fairy was good at talking, it would not be Qin Qingdu. He immediately smiled bitterly. He has been kept in the dark about the hiding, appearing and shooting of that high-ranking god, so that it affected the half of the city where the young hermits were combined. Before the old sword fairy appeared, Qin Pingan where he Dao is, in fact, it is concealed by a kind of attacking magical powers. Anyway, this is the negligence of myself and the Confucian temple which must be recognized. He can only confirm one thing for the time being, it was the secret action of the god, which seemed to wake up part of the primordial spirit of the old sword fairy. Did not hand out any sword to the wild world, but a sword opened the sky, escorting the city to soar to the colorful world. Finally, one more sword slayed the Dragon King who crossed the border. Now it is just a sword completely smashing the golden body of a high god. As for why Qin Qingdu was able to reappear, He did not want to explore. He had to admit that if it were not for the boss Zhenxian left behind in the Great Wall of Jianqi, He would definitely not be able to protect the half of the city where Qin Pingan Hadao, and the consequences would be disastrous. The overall situation of the whole body is the old Zayakai's lifeless style of protecting the calf. It is nothing to call himself a spray. The old Xiuzai can secretly go to the Confucian temple to carry his accompaniment statue. Why did the old talent step on that Middle-earth mountain? It's not for the disciple Zhou Xian to fight against the injustice. In the early years, Zhou Xian took her junior brother Qi Jingchun to visit the mountains, but was turned away by the mountain monarch, and even scolded so badly that he exposed Lu Xv's old bottom. It was the demon. Heterogeneous. It seems that the great mountain monarch, who has a very close relationship with Bai Yujing, tried to detain Lu Shirley and Qi Jingchun in the mountains. After Qin Qingdu held his hands, he walked slowly, shook his head and said, "Don't worry, half of the city has not been broken yet. For Qin Pingon today it is not a big problem. Anyway, this kid has long been used to suffering." Punch. Not to mention that the other party has been hiding for so long, and we Jianqi Great Wall are equally unaware. Besides, your scholar's life skills are still preaching and teaching karma to solve puzzles, fighting and killing. It is really not good at it. Yisho wanted to say something but stopped. After thinking about it, he still didn't say anything. I wanted to say that the most sage master and the saint of rights are good at fighting. It's just that you can't compete with the boss sword fairy. Dong Senging, Xiao Yun, Qin Shi, Qi Tingji and other swordsmen of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, aliens was Wu Pei Min, Zhou Xian etc. of the vast world, Lu Cha, the bearded swordsman of the wild world, and Bai Yujing are known as the truly invincible Yudo, the Taoist sword immortals profound capital Guan Sun Huaizhong. Anyway, for thousands of years, there have been several worlds in swordsmanship. How geniuses are born and the stars are so dazzling. No one claims to be invincible. Only because there is an old man named Qin Qingdu on the head of the city. As conceited as the second master teaches Yudo, in the early years he did not dare to ask Qin Qingdu about the sword without authorization, and stopped at the hanging mountain to catch and release the pavilion. Otherwise, Yudo only needs to step over the gate from the inverted mountain, and then step up to the head of the Great Wall of Jianqi. Why do you dare, unwilling or cannot ask the sword? Because asking the sword means losing, hurting or dying. According to legend, just a few years after arriving at the Great Wall of Jianqi, a Liang once drunk in the city and ran to participate in a summit sword fairy meeting that didn't call him at all. When he reached the top of the city, he strode up to the hut and used him. The saying is that I have been practicing for thousands of years at the head of the city, and there is no one and a half of the people who asked the sword. The boss sword immortal is too lonely, so let Aoyang come to break this example. All let me go. However, the city was discussing the sword immortal and watching the lively swordsmen outside the city. None of them held a liang anyway and waited until the old sword fairy walked out of the hut and nodded and said the word, "Okay." A liang seemed to wake up instantly. A jump, settled beside the old sword immortal, righteously added, "Let me rub my shoulders for the old sword immortal. You are really a bunch of whose conscience was eaten by a dog. You don't know that you feel sorry for the old sword immortal. Want me to be an outsider to ask for warmth?" Probably after that, Aoyang became famous in one fell swoop and gained a famous nickname. And after that, the dog's Aoyang has always regarded himself as the little padded jacket of the old sword fairy. It's just that the boss Jianxian felt that this statement was too disgusting, so it didn't spread in the Great Wall of Jianqi. Otherwise Alien would probably have another nickname. Qin Qing glanced at the long knife that fell on the ground, very familiar, because it was the object held by the Ancient of Punishment. In fact, not only was he familiar with it, but he had also dealt with it tens of thousands of years ago. The so-called dealings are naturally swords. In the last battle, the one who defeated this was a swordsman who was of the same age as Long Jun, but later this man followed the military ancestor and tried to embark on another path, and he did not hesitate to let someone who has become a gas trainer. The death of all beings eventually led to a big rupture within the human race, and the monks were killed and wounded countless. And this who had not completely fallen at the beginning, once ranked among the 12 high positions. According to the old heavenly priesthood, it can be regarded as the direct of the sword bearer. 10,000 years ago, under its blade, the corpses of the monster race were full of bones, piled up into mountains, and countless blood once gathered into an ancient blasphemy that penetrated the wild. Heaven and earth regard people as symbols, and avenues regard heaven and earth as bubbles. Qin Qing sighed. It seems that the senior who came to visit the city back then, maybe besides coming to see Qin Pingon, he also meant to cherish the memory of old friends. It's no wonder that the narrow sword Zhankhan, which was first left in the Qingming world, would follow the transfiguration demon to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, toss and turn all the way, and was finally obtained by Qin Pinyin. The narrow sword census, which belongs to the execution object of the ancient dragon platform, is similar to a mountain of princes to a great monarchy mountain, and has the meaning of worship. The way of heaven collapses, the sky is on one side, the avenue loops, and the two blades are adjacent. Qin Qing's heart moved slightly, and the unsheathed snow-white long knife slid to the head of the city and said, "I will trouble you to turn around and give this knife to our hermit, saying that he will get married with Ning girl in the future. Congratulations, people don't need to, but gifts are valuable." He nodded and agreed. Qin Qing waved his hands. "Go busy, we have nothing to talk about, we can only say something and nothing." Both sides are embarrassed. He didn't feel the slightest embarrassment at all. After all, it was a great blessing to be able to chat with the boss sword fairy as much as possible. It's just that Qin Qing said so, and he had to say goodbye to the old sword fairy again. The old master returned to the sky and continued to stare at the fairy crossings in the distance, feeling a little sad. After this farewell, he really had no chance to reunite with the boss sword immortal. Wei Jin had already got up. Yu Feng came to the cliffside area of the other city and said, "Wei Jin has seen the old sword fairy." Qin Qing all stepped to the edge of the cliff, glanced at the great sword immortal of Fengxue Temple, nodded. "The realm has risen. I haven't seen it in a few years, so I have to look at it with admiration." Wei Jin felt helpless. Chao Jun came to Wei Jin and didn't dare to breathe for a moment. He just whispered in his heart. Why did these words sound familiar? Qin Qing all looked at the few strands of pure sword intent beyond the city's head and asked, "I have lost the sword spectrum to you. Why can't I still win the approval of Zongyuan's sword?" The eldest sword immortal rubbed his chin. "There is no reason, you two have been separated for thousands of years. It stands to reason that no one can rob someone's daughter-in-law. That kid Zongyuan is a notoriously good-tempered man. Reason doesn't please you." In the history of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, there were actually some sword repairs, so I can say a few words with Qin Qing. For example, Zongyuan earlier and Dong Guanpu later. The old sword fairy suddenly narrowed his eyes and turned his head to look at a strange battlefield isolated from the secrets in the hinterland of the wild world. No wonder. It's meticulous again. With a wave of his sleeves, Qin Qingdu spread out in front of him a picture of a long river of time that was invisible to outsiders. Tueshan Baijian Xiandu once practiced swords in the next city. After looking over the sword fairy embryos in the wild world, he finally saw the young sword repairer who seemed to have the worst aptitude and was unable to obtain the gift of sword intent for a long time. Seeing that the boss sword fairy was silent, Wei Jin also shut up with interest. Chao Jun's eyes widened. Anyway, looking at the boss sword fairy a few more times is a profit. When the young swordsman was practicing swords at the head of the city, he seemed to be a little absent-minded, not doing his job properly, and more like a trainer who wandered around the mountains and water, just staring outside the city head in a daze. When a Qi trainer bred a natal flying sword, even if it is self-supporting, it is very different from other Qi practitioners. The top priority is to find 1 or 2 natal magic powers of flying sword as soon as possible. Therefore, there are almost no casual cultivators in the world. It is not without reason. The number of swordsmanship is relatively the most precious and rare. It is a treasure that is not too many in any sect in the world. It is too expensive to practice swords. Jinshan Yinshan, of course, it is not impossible to practice as Xianxia, but without the financial support of the sect, it is inevitable that you will get half the result. The final top priority is the magical power of Jianxia's life in the flying sword. In fact, it is a literal, natural gift, which can almost be regarded as a kind of gift from the gods. Because Xianxia's natal flying sword, the root of its avenue, used to be the straight roads on the riverbed in the long river of time, so it became the biggest darling of the subsequent generations of magic methods, the most orderly, and then evolved and derived countless kinds of flying sword natal supernatural powers. This is why Jianxiu has the most innate advantage among Qi practitioners, because Jianxiu is indeed blessed and unique. That's why swordsmanship is on the mountain, and only then can you be the least qualified to be the least reasonable. During those years, Tueshan Jianxiu left the city's head one after another, but this young Jianxiu, who was picked up by Qin Qingdu alone, was at the bottom of his rank and had no reputation. He left the city's head very late and seemed to have achieved nothing. People are not so much cultivating swords with swords, as they have been patrolling the relics of the Great Wall of Sword Qi with the view of water and moon and bones, and occasionally the few remaining sword intent belonging to Zongyuan pass in the air. Young sword repairers are like a big enemy. In the end, Jianxiu was quietly taken away by the 14th level monk, Lu Fian, who had chatted with Qin Pingon first. Otherwise, Long Jun would act in accordance with the law of the Jiazi account and fail to capture the pure sword intent. Going down the city alive. Qin Qingdu quickly found the clues. Except for a handful of pure sword repairs with innocent life, the carefully laid out Tuition Baijin fairy in the wild world is almost inextricably related to gods. For example, this young sword repairer is an undoubted god. Reincarnated, inherited part of the natal magical powers of a certain high-ranking god, the magical powers of that flying sword, close to visualization. Look at the bones through the skin, constantly inferring and piecing together the mind, and approaching a certain truth infinitely. Just to visualize a sword repairman from the Great Wall of Sword Qi Zongyuan is obviously one of the meticulous follow-ups, an unexpected surprise for Houran Tianxia and Jianqi Great Wall. Zongyuan's return to the world is not an accident. Seeing Zongyuan again in the world, is it a surprise? Qin Qing broke up the picture of time and said to Wei Jin, pick the key points and say something. One soul is tied to a little soul in this world can't stay long. The Wei and Jin dialects said something concise and concise. The most sage master was on the top of Sui Mountain in the Middle Earth, and the wild ancestor at the Jialongu site. The two sides exchanged views on Taoism. Aoliang was pressed under Tuyue Mountain for several years. After falling from the 14th realm, he first went to the western Buddhist country before returning to Houran. 4 immortal swords gathered in Fuyaozhou, and Bai Yi alone picked the 6 thrones with swords, and was later taken by Wenxing to the Daxuandu temple in the Qingming world. The wild world captured the mountains and rivers of Tongye, Fuyao and Jinjia, and was eventually intercepted by the Dali cavalry in the middle of Aquarius, and carefully led the crowd to the sky. Ning Yao, in that new hometown named Wuxia Tianxia, broke through the realm one after another, ascended to the ascendant realm, and became the first person in the world, during which she also personally killed a high-ranking god. A discussion in the Middle-earth Confucian temple and just hit the barren world. Aoliang took an ascended monk into the hinterland, and then flew to the left and right to help Aoliang with swords. Qin Pingon took the 4 sword repairmen and left the Jianqi Great Wall not long ago. The boss said only 2 words during the period. It's a pity that Bai is not a sword repairer after all, otherwise I can teach him how to use swordsmanship when he comes here. Ning girl is not surprising. Qin Qing asked 2 more questions. Does the left and right now rank among the 14th realms? Wei Jin shook his head and explained that Mr. Zhou had too much thought. He had the opportunity to enter the 14th realm, but he was delayed because of the pursuit of a broader kendo. Qin Qingda's last question. The Confucian temple and Tuition confronted each other. Did the little master say they want to fight? Wei Jin said with a smile. It's not the saint of rights, but Qin Pingon is the first to speak. Qin Qing nodded with a smile on his face. The kid is not foolish. Very much like myself. The old man never thinks that a person is full of vigor, just that kind of cheerful speech and action all year round. But at every pass in life, alone in times of misery, young people can be excited and energetic. Do the most unexpected thing, hand out the fastest sword and speak the most weighty words with this Fong Tian. People who are usually reluctant to speak occasionally speak up and teach others to listen even if they don't. Qin Qing put away his thoughts, shifted his sight a little, looked at Chao Jun, smiled and asked, this young sword fairy has a very famous name, where does he come from? Compared with Qin Pingon, Ning Yao and Wei Jin's own sword repairman on the Great Wall of Swordsmanship, Chao Jun, a foreigner, is over 100 years old. Indeed, he is not young. Chao Jun clasped his fist and said, the younger Chao Jun, whose ancestral home is in the Lizhu cave of Aquarius Island, is in the same alley with the hermit's ancestral house, but the younger was born in Nanpasuzhou. The ancestor Chao Jun is responsible for guarding the Zhenhai Tower. Chao Jun endured and endured but still couldn't hold back one more sentence. The juniors are actually only 140 years old. This I would like to add a sentence. If it weren't for Jianxing to be broken by the left and right in the early years, he would have already been among the 5 realms. Maybe there is still hope to be in the same realm as Fengxue Temple Great Sword Fairy. I just thought that on the side of the old sword fairy, it seemed that the sword repair in the fairyland was not worthy of praise, so he swallowed the sentence back to his stomach. Qin Qing gave a hum and nodded. That's about the same age and realm as the left and right, and the next generation is terrifying. Wei Jin held back a laugh. Chao Jun only felt that his face was muddled by the yellow mud, and he did not dare to talk back to the boss, Xianxia, and he was extremely uncomfortable. He can be regarded as a thorough understanding of the customs of the Great Wall of Jianqi. The Great Wall of Jianqi is worthy of the sword repair of the word sword fairy, and one is more distinctive than the other. Ning Yao's unsmiling, unsatisfactory. Lu Ji seemed to be facing someone outside the Great Wall of Jianqi. He wanted to cut a few swords when she saw anyone. Qi Tingji's young people should pay attention to them in the next life. Old Xian used the most kind expression and said the most cruel words. Finally, this old sword fairy is amiable and approachable. Even the great sword Immortal of the Fengxue temple in the Wei and Jin dynasties, who has always held a decent body, has a phrase, "You can't enter the summer palace." Qin Qing looked out of the city and suddenly whispered, "If you want to go, let's go. There is nothing to miss here. As a pure sword repairer, you must have a camp to pay attention to swords when you are alive. But since everyone is dead, only this bit of sword intent is left, and there is also a fart of enemy in us." The Wei and Jin dynasties looked calm, turned around and faced the south of the city. At this moment the sword heart of the Wei and Jin dynasties became more and more clear and transparent, and the deceased Jian Xiu Zongyun held his fists in salute. It's a big deal to see each other on the battlefield later, and then separate the swordsmanship level with the sword intent heirs of Zongyuan's predecessors, and fight for life and death. Qin Qing nodded with a smile. Zongyun is Zongyun. Xianxia's character is still awe-inspiring. A few strands of sword intent that had never been close to the Wei and Jin dynasties, in an instant for sword lights and long rainbows condensed in the air, and finally circulated slowly beside the sword fairy in Fengxue temple, unable to linger. This means that the Wei and Jin dynasties have belonged to the line of Zongyuan from then on in the kendo. There is no red tape for the inheritance of masters and apprentices, and there is no hanging statues in the ancestor hall. Wei Jin asked in his heart, "Dare to ask the old sword fairy what kind of existence is that existence 10,000 years ago?" Qin Qing hesitated for a moment. The old man looked complicated and finally shook his head. "I have seen it twice, there is nothing to say. In the battle of ascending to the sky, in addition to the fifth highest, only the 12 high-ranking gods in the ancient times, most of them have fallen in the tragic battle that changed the sky and the earth. In addition, either stay away from the ruins of the old heaven and become a lonely ghost outside the sky. Either fall into the unknown earth, sleep for a long time and fall asleep." Tianjun, the young boy who took care of one of the ascending platforms, was one of the earliest human beings who became gods, and once served as a guide for men to fly ascendant. The one who lay in the colorful world was severely injured in the battle of the human race's ascent to the sky in the early years. He was once under the armored man. The who descended on Tongyi's Hao from outside the sky, crossed the sea and crossed the Aquarius Island. When he landed, he was teamed up by Tui Yang and Qi Jingchun and was once named the Echoa. Kaiwei inherited a part of the position of God. She is not only as simple as the Moon Palace species, but is relatively the most promising to be among the high-ranking existences of the Mingyue predecessor. Killing these high-ranking gods has both pros and cons in the world. The advantage is that there is no deadly enemy of the human race with amazing combat power. The downside is that the gods will be vacated. After careful ascending to the sky, you can naturally create a new to fill the gap. Before 10,000 years, these high-ranking gods were not like their counterparts, but 10,000 years later, on the one hand, the heavens collapsed, just like a 14th-level monk who lost most of his attacking methods. It is the invisible text cage between heaven and earth, which imprisoned the gods greatly. Wen Hai is meticulous, and once created his own writing, it has been circulating in the wild world for thousands of years. Is to let the old and new gods, when they return to the world, they can try their best to get out of the text prison established by the saint. Not surprisingly, the barren world in front of you is the fairy where many gods of the new heaven have settled in the world. The only words of the ancient gods are actually similar to the so-called voices of today's cultivators, but they are similar but not all. The high-ranking who was smashed into pieces by Qin Qingdu with a sword, named the Executioner, was once under the command of sword-bearers. The demons in the world, especially the punished real dragons, suffered a lot. However, the divinity is not complete, it should be a long time to sleep, and some of the remaining natal supernatural powers have been stripped out by Tuyue Mountain, which makes the situation worse. Of course, it is just not as good at fighting as before, and it definitely does not mean that it is easy to kill. And the one that is regarded as one of the killers by Tuyue Shen, specifically used to target the high-level gods of Aoyang and the left and right, is probably the existence of the name Wai Mei Shi. One of the magical powers of is in the nightmare of imprisonment. As the old saying goes, there are many dreams in the night, which is part of the root of the thousands of demons outside the later generations. There is also the speaker of speech who possesses the magical power of stopping speech, also known as the speaker of heart. And the replicas who have created numerous sun and moon, countless mountains and rivers, also known as imaginers and casters. Of course, these ancient gods are named after the battle of ascending to heaven. Is not recorded in writing, just like the forefront of an old almanac, leaving a blank page specifically for these ancient existences. In life, it seems that children are curious about everything, young people know everything, middle-aged people doubt everything, and old people accept everything. As for good people and bad people, people have their own scales. It is hard to say who is a good person. I just hope that in the future thousands of years, don't ignore the contributions of those who are silent. A child is too young to do more. In fact, an elderly person may not be able to do more. Qin Qing rubbed his chin and looked up at the wild world. Can almost pass the sword. Who will ask the sword? Who is good to chop? The Bai Zai who returned to the wild world. Bai Zai has a good relationship with the little master, and Qin Qing is not familiar with me. Shirasawa and Fei Fei walked on the bank of a dry riverbed of a tributary of the falling river. Fei Fei noticed a trace of the vision on the site of the Great Wall of Jianqi, and she was shocked and asked softly, "Mr. Bai, the old immortal is actually not dead?" Bai Zai said, "You can't forget the whole Jianqi Great Wall just because Qin Pingon joined the half-sword Qi Great Wall. When Zhou climbed to the top of the city, besides closing the net, he also wanted to make sure. Since Zhou didn't have it, do it either without noticing it or even being deceived by him, or else I feel that it is impossible to get a sword from the boss over there, and there is another long-term plan. When Hai is careful, once in the posture of the 14th realm great monk Lu Fian, that is, the old throne big demon Qiun and the brilliant master traveled to the Great Wall of Sword Qi and had a chat with Qin Ping, and Bai Zai suddenly smiled and reminded, "You still have to respect the boss sword fairy." Fei Fei found that even though Qin Qing appeared, Bai Zai's attention was still on Tuyue Mountain, which was very strange. Recommend an app which is comparable to the old version of the book-chasing artifact, and can change the entire source book. The Tuyue Mountain is now an empty shelf with only the support of the culprit, and it can no longer affect the luck of too many wild days in the wild. 10,000 steps back and said, "Even if the lunatic Qin Pingon succeeded in driving the mountain, I am afraid it would be better for Ning Yao and the others to fly up the bright moon and then cut it down. The impact will be far-reaching." Fei Concubine did not hide and asked directly with Bai Zai, "Mr. Bai, are you worried about the safety of the great ancestor?" Bai Zai nodded. Returning to his hometown this time, Bai Zai will wake up a small group of long sleepers of the demon race, and then make an agreement with them to follow him. As for the unruly generations among them, the real bodies and their real names will continue to sleep together for thousands of years. Thousands of years away from home, Bai's only existence that can care about his hometown is very few, especially among those who are still alive today, and only the pioneer disciple of the great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain is left. Of course, the culprit is just the pseudonym of this barbaric ancestor. In fact, its real name has a beautiful meaning. Yuanji is not only Huang Chong Yuanji, but also the Yuanji of Swilingzhu E Yuanji. 10,000 years ago, after the riverside discussion, after that infighting, the world had settled down. According to the original agreement, both Jian Xiu and the military strategist could occupy a world, and the first ancestor of the military strategist could even establish a religion and become an ancestor. Is just the first ancestor of the ambitious military strategist and Qin Qingdu. Long Jun watched a large number of sword repairs, plus a part of the big monster who was about to move in fear the world would not be chaotic, and the three were finally defeated. Later, the monster race was assigned to the barren world today. The great ancestor of the wilderness took a child to the sky and began to climb the mountain, which is the Tuyue Mountain for later generations. There was actually Bai Zai who was walking with this pair of masters and apprentices. Approaching the top of the mountain, the old monk stopped and said with a smile, "Bai Zai, you are very knowledgeable. Why don't you give this kid a name? Remember to ask for a good sign." Bai Zai lowered his head and looked at the bright-eyed child, thought for a while, smiled and said, "Just called Yuanji?" At that time, the demon child who had just succeeded in refining had countless questions to ask Bai Zai, the most knowledgeable. "That little master, is he really good at fighting? How come you are not called a big master?" Your name is Bai Zhe because of your surname Bai Mingze? Why does anyone like to call you Mister? Master said it means you were born early and old. So what does master mean? It's really a preacher for is the father a teacher again? We have a share of the world. I heard that it seems to be the largest on the ground. Is it because we have done the best? On the way to the mountain, Bai Zhe was very patient and helped the child one by one. Walking up to the top of the mountain, the great ancestor of the wild looked around and finally smiled and said, Bais, this mountain does not have a name yet. Those who can do more work, you just named it together. Time is in the water and the moon does not leave the sky. Bai Zhe gave the mountain under his feet the name Tuyue Mountain. Finally, Bai Zhe touched the child's head and said with a smile, 1 yuan returns to the beginning, all things are renewed. In the future we will practice separately and have the opportunity to retell the old. Bai Zhe retracted his sight from Tuyue Mountain. Fei Fei asked, Mr. Bai will be on our side this time, right? Bai Zhe nodded. A big white goose rushed to the blacksmith shop from Luopa Mountain, flicking water in the air, standing still, shaking his clothes, shaking his sleeves and crackling. Lu Xianyang, who was so noisy and dozed off in the bamboo chair, opened his eyes immediately. There were 3 chairs under the eaves and one was just empty to serve guests. Cui Dongshan turned around with a little toe, leaned back and flew out. He just sat on the bamboo chair in the center with his butt. The man moved the chair to Lu Xianyang's side. Then the 2 people with aura each raised an elbow next to each other, the 2 sides bumped, dazzled. Brother Lu. Brother Cui. A round-faced girl in cotton-padded clothes sitting on the bamboo chair at the extreme side rolled her eyes. The names of both parties are even with a little vibrato. Cui Dongshan wiped his mouth, craned his neck and looked at Longxi River. Brother Lu, are there any old duck bamboo shoots in the pot? Lu Xianyang smiled, rubbing his hands and said, Is there any? I can't count it. Yu Qianyue turned her head and stared, glaring at the white-clothed youth who was wishful thinking. Lu Xianyang immediately understood, laughed and said, A clever woman can't cook without rice, Brother Cui, forgive me. Then Lu Xianyang asked curiously, Is there a business to discuss? Cui Dongshan waved his sleeves, No, just come here to relax. There are not many melon seeds on the mountain. This is a decree of the right guardian. Let me go down the mountain to help buy some. Hey, according to the quotation of millet grains, say maybe I can make some money. Lu Xianyang smiled and said, You are embarrassed to black out the silver of millet grains? Cui Dongshan smiled and said, You don't understand, right? The guardian deliberately rewarded me with a mountain run fee. Lu Xianyang nodded and said the mantra of millet grains, very clever, smart. Cui Dongshan hugged the back of his head with his hands and said with emotion, It is a good time for the rest of his life. If the husband is still in his hometown and never traveled far away again, so much the better. Lu Xianyang gave a hum knowing the reason but didn't say much. He was mainly afraid of scaring the round-faced girl who pretended not to care and listened carefully. Cui Dongshan is talking about that old and Qi Jingchun, the humanity that used to be in the gambling Ruanxiu. Will she leave a trace? Will she miss the world a little bit? Otherwise, at the midday of Binggu in May, the longest day in the world, there will be a great sacrifice to the heaven and the Lord's day with the moon. Qin Pingon, Lu Xianyang's song moved the chai, the credit month thrown here, coupled with the unusually abundant Longzhou water transport, were originally used by Ruanxiu to refine the mirror. 3 people and 1 monster or soul, luck or skin, anyway, no matter what it is, they are all refined into a mirror as the stairs of the of fire. Lu Xianyang was half joking, saying that it was Li Lu and prevented them from disaster. Because Li Liu's share of the water god's Tao divinity was eaten by Ruanxiu. Lu Xianyang said, In fact, it's not a gambling, it seems that she will not act like this. Cui Dongshan nodded and said, I just don't know what Qi Jingchun said to her in the end. I can't figure it out, I can't guess. It's really not a bet but a belief in human nature. Lu Xianyang glanced at the Wanyan bridge that crossed the Longxi River from a distance. He didn't care about it and smiled, Then don't think about anything, live, there are really many things, only the ship arrives at the bridge. Straight. Cui Dongshan handed over a handful of melon seeds, tilted his palm and poured half of it to Lu Xianyang. Sure enough, Big Brother Lu is the most unrestrained and unrestrained. Lu Xianyang nibbled on melon seeds and stepped on the back of Cui Dongshan's foot. Lu Xianyang immediately turned his head and raised his palm. Miss you? Credit Moon shook his head with a straight face. But she is in a better mood. Cui Dongshan spit out melon seed shells and sighed. My master sister's mood is so sad, it is estimated that my husband will have to go out to smooth it out. Pei Qian returned from a long trip back then, carrying the kind of foreign pastry called wudu bing. On the right side of Sui, the two sides almost didn't fight. Because Pei Qian once saw a prohibition monument in a rural village in Jinjiazhu. The inscription contains only one sentence. It is forbidden to kill girls and boys are born on the 5th day of May. Why should such a prohibition monument be erected? Of course, because there are too many such prohibitions, the local government needs to set up a monument to stop such tragedies. Preferring boys to girls, abandoning baby girls and secretly drowning in the water. The baby boy born on the 5th day of May is a bad omen and can bring disaster. Qin Pingan's birthday happens to be the 5th day of May. Not only in the town but in the entire world, children born on this day, especially baby boys, will not be seen. Cui Dongshan finished eating the seeds, clapped his hands, smiled brightly and said, "For sir, I have to thank you as for the affection, it is all in the seeds." Lu Xianying smiled and said, "There are more melon seeds every year and the more they are not bad." Cui Dongshan stretched his legs and leaned back in his chair lazily. "You don't need to exhaust the riches, the rest is to accumulate blessings. Don't deceive yourself if you are poor, and respect yourself is to respect heaven. The first time to make a fight, the first time to hold a fist, the first time to wear boots, don't get hairpins, and the first time to call myself a husband. Whenever I think of Mr. doing this as a student, I can't help but want to laugh." Lu Xianying licked melon seeds, listened to the words of the big white goose, nodded and said, "Good people have a good night and G people have their own heavens. According to our old saying, there will be 1 or 2 bitter winds in front of anyone's house. The sooner you come, the better, and then get over it. You can feel at ease and enjoy the blessing. Otherwise, wait until you are too old to jump the wall and then there will be a bitter wind. You can't avoid it and you can't stand it. Besides, the more you eat the better. You know that you can eat anything under the sun, but you can't eat food for children and grandchildren. That's why we have the term leftover." Cui Dongshan stood up and said with a smile, "Go, don't delay Big Brother Lu from getting busy." Lu Xianying waved his hand. Before Cui Dongshan left, his hippie smiled and said, "Some things are best done after getting married and visiting the church. It's more reasonable. It's just that the firewood is raging and the sky thunders in the fire." Lu Xianying smiled awkwardly. Credit Yaya with a smile and said, "Things gather people into groups." After the big white goose got out, Lu Xianying did not continue to doze off and practice swords in his dream, and talked about old things with the girl Yu. Said that there is a local customs in the town, asking for dinner and dreaming for dinner, because according to the local accent of the town, asked and dream are homophonic. It is on the New Year's Eve. Every household has eaten the New Year's Eve dinner. The old people will stay at home and open the door to entertain guests. Guarding the stove, the table is full of wine and dishes. Young and strong men visit each other and serve. Drinking, the relationship is good, just drink a few more glasses. The relationship is flat, after a drink change the place. The children are more lively after changing into new clothes one by one. They are often in groups walking around, everyone slanting back. A cotton satchel is filled with melons, fruits, pastries, melon seeds, peanuts, sugarcane, etc. And when it is full, I ran home immediately. Asked Yeye, "Is it the custom of the entire Longzhou?" Howren under the mountains of Jiuzhou, almost everyone has the habit of vigil. Of course she knew this credit month, but she just asked about supper, which was the first time she heard. In the few years since she came here, at most only in the 12th lunar month, she followed Lu Xianying to Hongzhou town to rush several times to buy some New Year goods. Lu Xianying shook his head. "It's only unique to our small town. In recent years, more and more people have moved to Zhouqing, Junqing, and this custom has faded. It is estimated that in another 20 or 30 years, it will be completely. Don't pay attention to it." On Fulu Street in Taoya Alley, it seems to be very boring to ask about supper. On the contrary, the poor alley is more noisy. It is like a kind of poor people who have no money, but it is lively and popular. It is hard to describe. The taste of the year and humanity. Before Qin Pingan met Lu Xianying and Gu Ken's birth, every lunar New Year's Eve he would stay alone in the house in Mud Bottle Alley until dawn. It was destined that no neighbor from the neighborhood would come to the door and he would not go. As soon as he came to the house, there was only one person. It seemed that he could not get away. It said he was not welcome. No one would like to see him on this day. Those old people who are willing to be close to Qin Pingan, even if they are willing to be with Qin on weekdays. Talking about peace is without restraint. Only on this day there must be some taboos. The old people are mainly afraid that the young people at home will feel bad. They will not have trouble with their family because of an outsider. Happy. Credit you listened to Lu Xianying's past, whispered. Hongguan was so pitiful when he was a child. Lu Xianying stretched out his thumb and pointed at himself. After meeting my friend Qin Pingon is much better. Every time I have a New Year's Eve dinner, I close my door and go to Ni Ping Alley to accompany Qin Pingon and get a treat. Use the tongs to poke the charcoal on the small stove and watch the year together. In fact, Lu Xianying often fell asleep very early, but Qin Pingon sat quietly by the fireside until dawn. Qinyue suddenly wondered, then you close the door at your own house so you don't have to wait for guests? Lu Xianying laughed and said, I'm so poor that my eldest brother and second elder brothers don't meet each other, so what kind of guest to be with? Credit you, I understand this sentence. It is a unique saying of Lu Xianying. Gold is the master, silver is the uncle. Two kinds of copper coins are called big brother and second brother. In the past, ordinary people outside of Fulu Street and Taoye Alley in the small town, inside the general portal money exchanges, it is not necessary for gold and silver. Unless it is the kiln heads of those dragon kills and some skilled masters, their salaries will be calculated in silver. Asked Yeye, keeping together, what can you two talk about? Didn't you say that the hidden official at that time was a dull gourd who didn't fart? Isn't it boring? Lu Xianying smiled and said, Qin Pingon doesn't talk much but he is not a dumb man. Lu Xianying was silent for a moment. Besides, on my side, this kid is still willing to say a few more words. Credit you turned his head and glanced at Lu Xianying. This guy can only be extremely proud, especially proud when he talks about his friend. Qin Pingan's valuables were pawned for sale when he was a child. I would really say something to Lu Xianying, for example, first repair the tombs of parents and mothers. The few fields left by the ancestors are not a few acres. The east and the west are one piece and it is best to buy it back. If you make more money you will build your ancestral house and you still have money left. The house next door that seems to be unoccupied when you were young will have to be bought. In fact, when Qin Pingon was an apprentice as a kiln worker, in addition to the messy expenses on Gukin, he could still save some money, but he was borrowed by Lu Xianying, which caused misfortune. Lu Xianying has never concealed these things on the credit month side. Later there was a little slug that dragged oil bottles in Mud Bottle Alley, and Qin Pingon had a little more smiling face. He really regarded Guken as his own brother, or maybe because he couldn't feel sorry for himself when he was a child. Now I feel more distressed for the little slug that is in front of me every day. And Guken did stick to Qin Pingon when he was young. Few people know that in the early years Qin Pingon almost taught Guken to talk and walk by hand. Over there, the widow and orphan Guken's mother did not want to remarry in order to support the family in those years. In fact, she had no time at all during the week. Often she would just leave Guken casually and leave it to Qin Pingan. I can't imagine what it would be like for a young man who didn't know a few words himself, holding a branch, squatting on the ground, and teaching a little slug to write the word, Gukan. Makes others feel funny, but it seems that they can't laugh. Suffering hardship is the only kind of knowledge that does not need to be taught by others. Perhaps the only thing that is more bitter than suffering is that you can't wait for a bitterness to come. Credit months listening to these old almanacs that are not long ago, Lu Xianying smiled and said, don't think it's such a big deal. In other words, compared to practicing in the mountains, it's not just the chicken and dog in the alleys every year, every family. Don't you think Qin Pingon is? After experiencing this, I became a boring gourd. I heard from the neighbors in the neighborhood near Ni Ping Alley that the guy didn't talk much when he was a kid. In the memories of the old people, there are many sayings, each different. The only way to say that kid's eyes have been very bright since he was a child. Credit Yeye silently recite the phrase, Liang Tang, then nodded and said, it's a very good phrase. Lu Xianying triumphantly said, my hometown has too many old talkers. Xinyue wondered, Liang Tang doesn't seem to be the native language unique to your town, right? Lu Xianying smiled and said, then the other girl is just fine. After Lu Xianying started to doze off with his eyes closed. Crying Yeye went to the river. She was afraid that some people in the town would like to smash rocks and steal ducks. One day afterwards, the ancestor hall of the Longquan Jinzong was relocated, and Wan Qiong would rarely go back here. He would just happen to be walking by the river. Tentatively asked, Master Wan, do you want to eat dried duck bamboo shoots? She suddenly smiled shyly, both distressed and embarrassed about the group of ducks she had carefully raised. I am not old. Pray in my heart, Master Wan, you will be polite, please don't nod this head. Wan Qiong only remembered that when he was on the road in the Longxu River near the blacksmith shop, there seemed to be a group of ducks pouring cheerfully. The man rarely smiled and shook his head. Master Wan shook his head. On the contrary, the conscience became uneasy. That's all it was left to Lu Xianying to deal with. She pretended that she hadn't seen anything, and just waited for the steaming old duck bamboo shoots to be served on the table. Put down the chopsticks again. Wan Qiong asked, where is Lu Xianying? Xiaoyu blinked her eyes. She is not good to lie to Master Wan, then pretend to be stupid. Wan Qiong said helplessly, I have something to do with him. Xiaoyu seemed to temporarily remember where Lu Xianying had gone and said, I don't know. He just said, there are fighters in the neighboring town and he was given a crown to save him. So he ran to the town. Go ahead with business, after all you are a scholar. Wan Qiong glanced at the small town a few times. In one street, two old ladies were scratching their faces and pulling their hair. Lu Xianying squatted with a group of young men and big kids to eat sunflower seeds and watch the fun. It is said that when people grow up, their hometown is small. I also said that there is no scenery in the places I frequent. On Lu Xianying's side there is no such saying. Asked Yeye, can I call him back for help? No need, things are not urgent. Wan Qiong waved his hand. Two bamboo chairs were placed under the eaves. Wan Qiong went to the house and moved out the bench. Credit month still reminded Lu Xianying to come back quickly. Lu Xianying immediately ran back from the arch bridge, but it was a pity that the two ants were about to tear each other's clothes. After Lu Xianying took his seat, Xiaoyu had already returned to the house. Wan Qiong was silent for a long time before he said, Lu Xianying. Lu Xianying questioned, Huh? Smith Wan is a bit weird today. Why do you miss your little disciple so much? So that he came here just to call a name? Wan Qiong continued to be silent. Lu Xianying handed over a jug of wine. Wan Qiong did not refuse, but after taking the hip flask, the old man began to drink boring wine. Lu Xianying didn't drink alcohol by herself. He raised his feet with his hands on his sleeves, and the two shoes gently bumped against each other. Wan Qiong suddenly said, if I didn't stop them both back then, would it be better now? Lu Xianying was speechless for a while. At this moment, Lu Xianying, who has always believed that he can speak well, really does not know how to say a word. Drinking wine, Wan Qiong said in a hoarse voice, blame me. Lu Xianying looked forward and whispered softly, Master, don't say that, don't think so really. Wan Qiong remained silent for a long time before he said, is there any wine? Lu Xianying then brought out 2 bottles of wine, 2 masters and apprentices, one for each. Drinking one is afraid of not drinking enough, second is afraid of not being drunk, and most afraid of not feeling that you are drinking while drinking. Life is short but sadness is long. Qin Pingan's heart. A heart lake is flat like a mirror, and all the mental scenes on the water surface, the sun, the moon and the stars, the library, the graves, etc., are all reflected in it, not bad at all. The state of mind is the mirror. Only one thing is extra. Like under the water on the other side of the mirror, there is a person standing. Therefore once the mirror is upside down, it is veritable upset. This person at first glance is Qin Pingan himself, but at first glance, it is more like that of Qin Pingan, who is a great capital and purely divine. If someone stares at him for a long time, he will be plausible with the first 2. This person keeps his eyes closed with a calm smile on his face, walking slowly on the mirror. The heaven and the earth are silent, silent and silent like a grave. It seems that only the human heart of the monk can be the only non-existent boundary in the long river of time, or the long river of time chooses to stay eternally here. The Golden Arch Bridge. Li Zhen smiled and said, I declare in advance, I promise that this is the last time I am gloating. The hidden officer did not choose the credit month, but temporarily changed his mind and chose the middle moon. Is it a small accident? Do you need my help? Do you want to stop the sword repair? Or even this kind of thing is within the calculation of the husband? Zhou shook his head, I never counted it, it was an accident. Li Zhen took a few steps back, jumped, sat on the railing, arms around his chest, dazed. The territory of New Heaven is too big and there are too few people who can chat. Liz Hen asked, what was that guy thinking about 10,000 years ago? Why is it that Sister Wan and Li Lu are now fighting a battle between fire and water, where the earth is cracked and the sea is dry? Xiao, who had been standing on the railing, turned her head when she heard the words, and looked at Liz Hen, the successor of the armored man. Liz Hen immediately changed the subject. A little earlier, why did other gods create a human race on the earth? The gods will pursue the immortality of the golden body and the inability to self-destruct. Zhou Mi smiled and gave the answer in his heart. The truly immortal feel the most lonely, is alone, is unlikely to be alone. Because of the ultimate divinity, this perception is not allowed. Even if you have it for a short time, you know it is an illusion. Ancient gods, gods on the head. Liz Hen began to mutter to herself. Whoever will shake the world will be silent for a long time. Whoever will ignite the lightning will eternally drift like a cloud. Sword of Coming Chapter 864. Outside the mountain, confrontation in pairs, each showing its magical powers. One visits the door and the other welcomes guests. On Qin Pingan's side, the Daoist and Xing Yi, who walked out of the wooden house, appeared behind Tuyue Mountain, standing on top of the 5-colored mountains, like a standing on top of the sky, holding a water print containing 40% of the water transport in the falling river. Hanging on the waist is a ritual of praying for rain with the circulation of treasure. Behind the tall Taoist Faxiang, a golden statue with the appearance of a god, with arms wrapped around a fire dragon, and a footstep on an imitated white jade palace, is manifested from the treasure of the mountain of Yufu Palace in the past, and stands in the city of Xianxia. Lifted a sword fairy banner, a 5-thunder seal was lifted high by the gods, and hung on the highest point of the small bird world in the cage. After Qin Ping's eye-opening, the 36 gods, together with the 18 ethereal swords in white immortal heroic spirits, wandered around the territory of 6,000 miles of mountains and rivers, wantonly beheading the monster monks around Tuyue Mountain. After the 36 gods slid out of the Dharma seal, there was still a large group of them behind them, like murals flying to the sky, and they were floating like immortals. The goddesses had long eyebrows, thin eyes, plump faces and clear bones. They have crowns on their heads, ribbons on their shoulders, jewels on their chests and bracelets on their arms, dragging a long flame-like thread, colorful clouds swirling, and smallpox scattered all over the sky. It's like a large swath of fireflies suddenly flying out of the night, with brilliance flowing, extremely gorgeous. Compared with this scene, the picture created by the monks in Xianzhan City fleeing before is really not worth mentioning. Lu Chen squatted in the Lotus Dojo and a small drawing appeared in front of him. While drawing a talisman to draw a picture of time, he sighed, "Good luck, feast your eyes." These ancient spirit-like flying goddesses have never been depicted on the 4 sides of the Dharma seal. They are completely unexpected joys and are born following the cycle of heaven. It is the remnant of the heavenly Tao after the collapse of the ascending platform in Tuyue Mountain, which lasts for thousands of years, similar to the pure sword intent that lingers on the Great Wall of Jianqi. After Qin Pingan put his eye on, he completed a part of the avenue and then ordered them out, just like winning a place for them in a new world after 10,000 years. In ancient times, there were 2 ascending platforms between the heaven and the earth. On the side of Lizhu Cave, Old Man Yang was responsible for attracting the male earth immortal to ascend to become a god, and the ascending platform on the Tuyuetian side naturally brought the female earth immortal to reborn. Among the gods, on the side of the big demon culprit, the real body is holding the golden spear made from the corpse of the god, and besides the Een who travels far away from the orifice, there is a puppet resigner by his side, the concubine on the river, the extremely spiritual god. Her back is facing the master, and Qin Pingan from her sleeves drew a long green river, rushing to the Taoist Xing Yi using water law to water law. The culprit Zhou Xian held a fire sledgehammer on the second highest hill in Tuyue Mountain, and a large drum full of wild atmosphere appeared in front of him. The drum was beaten with the hammer. The imitated white jade capital behind Qin Pingan's golden body seemed to be torn out of thin air. A large piece of Taishu realm, crimson vortexes appeared, and countless heavens and earth auras were hammered by drums, making a sword fairy banner in the city. Shook violently and hunted. The golden spirit with arms wrapped around the fire dragon landed in the city of Xianxia, holding the flag with one hand, and at the same time driving the 5-thunder seal of the high-hanging sky. Thousands of gold threads flowed on the seal, and there were countless in an instant. The golden thunder and lightning slammed into the ground, falling onto Tuyue Mountain between the earth and the sky, like building thousands of bridges to the sky. Lu Chen sighed. It's a pity that this battle is the only way to watch the battle. There is great beauty in the heaven and the earth, but the growth and destruction of all things contains indescribable nature. Lu Chen glanced at the long sword held by Qin Pingon in his left hand. It was indeed the only existence above the 4 fairy swords of Gao Taibai, Wanfa, Dao Zong, and Innocence. It's higher than the sky, it's impossible to be higher. Qin Pingon asked Tuo Yushan this time, which was equivalent to one person holding the sword and driving Tuo Yushan more than 3,000 times. No one believes this kind of thing. It's like the Gongda Lin of the Middle-earth Confucian temple was overthrown 3,000 times, and Bai Yujing was broken 3,000 times. Who would believe it? No matter how empty the air is, there will be no 14th-level monks sitting in it, and there is still a Tuyue mountain, the Confucian temple, and Bai Yujing. As for why the culprit could not be smashed with a single sword, and Tuyue mountain was completely smashed, it was only like the sword opened in the Middle-earth Sui mountain in the Middle-earth when he was a teenager. First, the great monster at the peak of the Ascendant Realm joined the mountain. The magic is weird and it can restore Tuyue mountain thousands of times, and because of Qin Ping's sword skills, it is still not enough. Therefore it was impossible for Qin Qing to smash the ascended platform with a single sword 10,000 years ago, nor could it be compared with the great ancestor Tuyueshan breaking the Great Wall of Jianxi with one hand 10,000 years later. And it's by no means that the long sword is not sharp enough. Of course this Qin Pingon is selfish. It is equivalent to using Tuyueshan to practice swords, trying to cast out thousands of swords, even more than 10,000 swords, to cast his own mixed swordsmanship, mind and law. Attempt to combine as some own kendo. It is estimated that Bai Yujing will practice his hands for the future questioning sword. Lu Chen noticed the turbulent changes in Qin Pingan's personal small world, and couldn't help but ask in his heart, "Are you injured? Isn't it light?" There must be a problem with the half of the Great Wall of Sword Qi where Hedao is located. This is also normal. If it weren't the case, the boss sword fairy would not show up. But since Qin Qing was all over there, Lu Chen didn't think there would be any surprises. Once a cultivator shows up, it seems that both the enemy and us can feel that all accidents will be avoided and detoured. For thousands of years, not many. Only a handful. Lu Chen believed that he couldn't do it temporarily and he couldn't do it either. The 14th realm and the 15th realm have always been regarded as 2 lost realms without any name. The so-called lost transmission means that there is no teacher's rumor, there is no inheritance of Taoism, and the incense sticks. If you want to break the bottleneck of the Ascension realm and enter the 14 realms, you can only seek self-evidence and self-understanding. Do your own way, prove your own way, see for a long time and prove immortality. It is all based on the self-realization of the cultivator. The so-called cultivator of the Qi is to use the boundless spiritual energy of the world to shape the limited shape of the human body. The decayed life and ultimately the unity of man and nature is no longer a road thief, and does not owe the slightest debt to the world. Therefore, the 14th realm great monk only has a few secret and undisclosed cryptic statements on the top of the mountain, among which there is a so-called non-god and non-immortal world of heaven and human. Each of the 3 teachings has a purpose to explain the meaning of heaven and man. Among them, veteran talents who visited Longhushan Tianqi's mansion in the past years gave a pair of couplets to Zhao Tianlai, the contemporary great celestial master. Among them is the plaque "Heaven and Man are one." Qin Pingon continued to control Jing Zongyi's sword formation, and the culprit had a great deal of power depending on who was consuming it. He replied in his heart, "Small things, just get used to it." Lu Chen smiled and said, "This is something that hurts Dao's roots. It's still a trivial matter. What else is there to talk about?" If the half of the city was cut by someone, Qin Pingon would have broken the Chongqing Bridge again. When he returned his Dao Fa to Lu Chen, the consequences would be disastrous. Lu Chen couldn't help but said, "Boss Sword Fairy is really good to you." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "My elders have always had a good relationship." Lu Chen anxiously said, "Qin Pingan, according to my calculations, you will be in a situation where you will be eating food after 8,000 swords. If you are lucky, you can use the years of cultivating the Tao to slowly pay off your debts. Take a realm to fill the hole and almost luck. Forget it, don't say bad things." Qin Pingon nodded, "I know it in my heart." In Lu Chen's last words, he wanted to say that after borrowing a few realms now he would fall back a few realms later. But this was the worst case. Lu Chen felt that the luck he had combined with Qin Pingon would not be so bad. Earlier, Lu Chen was worried that Qin Pingon would go to the Qingming world in just 7 or 80 years. He broke his wrist with Brother Yu early. Now he started to worry about his abbot Bai Yujing's affairs, but Qin Pingon was because of this. The sequelae of the battle at the beginning of the field will not show up for a long time, so how lonely is you? Regardless of his hometown and the world, his reputation is average. In fact, in Bai Yujing he is also a real person who is recognized as decent, dignified and unsmiling. Lu Chen wondered, why didn't Ning Yao and the others stay for a while? The 4 sword repairmen worked together to produce swords, and Qin Pingon didn't need to drive the mountain alone, so naturally it was much easier. The 2 events of opening a mountain and dragging the moon have no difference in the impact on the luck of the wild world. Just one of these feats is enough. Outside of the sky, it would be a heavy blow to the Dao heart of the cultivators of the wild monster race. Of course, in the long run, it must be to move away the bright moon in the middle of the past year, leaving only 1 month left in the wild world, which is more meaningful than smashing an empty Tuyue mountain. If you delay the month, 20 to 30%, maybe 30 to 40% possible. Is there a difference? In my opinion, it is not a difference of 5 or 6, nor is it a difference of 90. There is no difference between the two. In Lu Chen's view, the safest choice is to join the 5 sword repairmen to open the mountain and kill the culprit on the spot. It is better to give up on dragging the moon. Qin Pingon explained, I have more accidents here and you can have fewer accidents by delaying the month. Lu Chen sighed and turned his head to look at the top of Tuyue Mountain. The man in yellow who had been in prison for more than 10,000 years is indeed a hard-to-read scripture. The wood that the primordial culprit of the great demon hasn't appeared in this world for a long time is like a 10,000-year-old tree that has been refined for a long time at the same time. Every time Qin Ping's sword opens the mountain, the culprit will lose a natal ring. When all the annual rings disappeared, it was the time when this wild great ancestor died alone. In the Tuyue Mountain, the 3 fairyland monsters who were supposed to call the wind and rain in their hometown were miserable, clearly begging for mercy with the culprit, and had to continue to bite the bullet and fight their lives to sacrifice their own assassin methods to save themselves, except for that one. The centipede wrapped around the mountain tip several times, and there was a monk of the fairyland demon race sitting on a colorful futon. The fairy was pouring water. More than 100 kinds of flowers sprang up, bloomed, and withered. A female demon fairy, she is wearing a pair of golden silk embroidered copper nail pattern armor. There is an ancient jade immortal hanging in front of her carrying a lamp. She is burning the talisman, lighting the wick, and the flame presents a pure golden yellow, like the melting color of gold fine copper coins. Obviously, they all sacrificed their life treasures and resorted to life-saving techniques at the bottom of the box. The centipede raised its huge head and glanced at Wanzhong Daoist Fa. The culprit sneered and said, "Just a look and you have formed an alliance with the hidden officer? Very good, then try to join hands with him and fight me." The culprit also added a sentence, "As long as the 3 of you can escape the jurisdiction of Tuyue Mountain alive, I can promise that Firen and the wild world will not be held accountable for your betrayal." These 3 monster monks with a fierce reputation who had also seized one side. But at the moment they are probably scared of fear. How can they dare to be an enemy of Howren in the future? If there are elders in the market under the mountain, it is estimated that you will have to come to Tuyueshan to help the 3 of you to resurrect. The outer body of the culprit was beaten with a sledgehammer on the surface of the drum. It was the real skin of a waterborne demon at the peak of the Ascension realm in the early years. Holding a fire luck sledgehammer, he beat the drum and hit the drum with a hammer. Above, in addition to colliding with the golden body and thunder method, the huge centipede whose true body entangled Tuyue Mountain was also guilty. It was affected by the dull drumming and the skin was suddenly broken and bloody. The other 2 still maintained their physical appearance. The immortal monk bleeds from the 7 orifices, the futon is shaking endlessly, the white bowl has a cracking sound and the lamp, which was originally like a beautiful skin white and tender, shows a somewhat dull pearl yellow. Continue, the light flickers, take out a stack of golden talisman, endure with the pain of Dao's instability and soul trembling, fingers trembling, lit all together trying to keep the light from going out. The centipede was in pain and its body continued to roll, crushing the mountain, and the gravel of Tuyue Mountain fell towards the foot of the mountain, dusty and yellow sand rolling. The poor 3-headed celestial demon is like being caught in a difficult situation targeted by Zhenxiu and the culprit. It is difficult to survive. However, after the centipede monster was broken by the culprit's thoughts, he no longer dared to take a fluke. Previously he still wondered if he could join hands with the young hermit to do something icing on the cake, as long as he could retain his realm today and escape from Tuyue Mountain alive. After that, as long as the culprit dies, it can be considered as a certificate of surrender to Hauran Xianxia, and he will not stop doing it, and he will go back, sneak back, bring the natal lamp and find a return to the market ferry and go to Hauran. The world, for example, find Jing Juzhong, the great demon of Baidi City, as a backer. Just thinking of the culprit speaking backwards, the three immortals who were originally quite moved had to dispel this idea. Surrounded by mountains and rivers, the two mountain monks' spells appeared endlessly, just like blooming everywhere. In the surrounding area of Tuyue Mountain, there is actually no sect. There are occasional monks from the upper 5 realms in the mountain, and they immediately leave with wit and set up sects elsewhere, spreading branches and leaves. It seems that this is a customary affair, and it is good to enjoy the cool under the shade. In the wild world there is no such saying. In fact, these scattered and weatherless mountain sects, many monster monks, may not have been close to that mountain within 1,000 miles in their lifetime. Among the descendant disciples of the great savage ancestor, only Xinzhuang, who occasionally went down the mountain to relax, often walked not far, and she was too lazy to use blindfolding methods, so that the monster monks in the surrounding area of Tuyue Mountain had the honor to have a glimpse. Located 5 or 6,000 miles away from Tuyue Mountain, the Xianxia mansion is built with carved beams and painted buildings, and there are colorful clouds everywhere. As a result, a big hand protruding from the sea of clouds, white jade and clear, with palm lines like lakes and ponds, lotus flowers blooming in the rivers and numerous snowflakes scattered. In an instant the snow covered the mountains, which was a disaster of extinction. In a reed swamp with strong water transport in the distance, another sea of clouds gathered in the sky, and a torrential rain fell without warning, and the raindrops contained sword energy. A Yuan Ying demon clan who was forced to leave the monastery water mansion and appeared in shape, had just escaped from the heavy rain of the innocent disaster, and was slashed by a sword immortal heroic who was parading here in white and white. Can avoid that sharp sword light. Shudi mountain range is more than 100 miles away, and behind him is another flagman sword spirit handing out a trailing sword, and he immediately shows his true body, carrying a sword forcibly and regaining his human form again. Under the earth I ran into a who seemed to be waiting for a rabbit. The opponent was the ancient rain master, hovering in the void under the ground as if it was soaked by Daohua. With a hand out of the ground, it imprisoned the Yuanying demon race in the original the ground. The water law was stripped from the soul, and there were thousands of threads between the two sides. On top of the Daoist's form of innocence, a series of real names of the big demon suddenly appeared, like an ancient well with waves of water constantly spreading. The long golden bridge of the culprit seemed to possess a kind of magical powers similar to Confucian natal characters, which caused such anomalies to appear in the Taoist's physiognomy, and as the ripples of the water ripples spread, there appeared an avenue of scattered ashes. Signs of collapse. Lu Chen squinted. According to legend, there are 84,000 ways in Buddhism. Among them, more side door magical powers are derived. Although they are not included in the righteousness of the law, their power should not be underestimated. One of them is this kind of training. The heart is pushed into a state of despair. Qin Pingon didn't care about this. First condense the Buddhist aquarium seal, and then form the 5 seals of saying, fearless, wishful, demon casting and meditation. In an instant 386 seals are formed. All of a sudden the ashes of the 10,000 Zhang Dharma were stopped from drifting away. And the Taoist in Tsing-yi behind Tuyue Mountain echoed with it. There was no need to step on the gang to fight, and they pinched the Taoist tactics. There were a total of 356 seals. One seal is the thunder symbol. The heavenly secret moves at will and finally creates a sky. The mighty thunder board. Lu Chen was stunned for a moment. These things hadn't been taught to Qin Pinyin. They belonged to the knowledge of Taoism outside of Lu Chen, so even if Qin Pingon had been examining his heart for thousands of years, it would be meaningless. Because this thunderboard belongs to the orthodox line of the Dragon Tiger Mountain Heavenly Master Mansion. Generally speaking, as long as you are not an alternate candidate for the Heavenly Master, you are destined to be unable to know this supreme thunder method. Therefore, only the great celestial masters of the past can evolve the thunderboard. If Lu Chen is willing to work harder, he will not hesitate to spend more than 100 years, but he will be able to imitate a 70 or 80% thunderstorm, But these mountain trails are too wicked, and it is like jumping up and facing the face of the contemporary great heavenly master I spit. With Zhou Tianlai's temperament, which is not too much, it is estimated that he will directly hold the fairy sword and bring the seal of the heavenly master to travel to the Qingming world and go to Baiyujing. Find yourself to learn Taoism. On the top of Tuya Mountain, the culprit suddenly said to Qin Pingon, "Let go of the nearby ants, I will accompany you in a fight," really asking the sword. The culprit flicked his wrist, and the golden spear in his hand instantly turned into a long sword covered with golden seals. He asked, "How?" Qin Pingon nodded unexpectedly and said, "Yes." Sure enough, the world of the caged bird was reduced to 1,000 miles of mountains and rivers, and only the confronting two sides outside the mountains were left on the battlefield. And the 3 lingering fairyland monsters on the mountain. The culprit smiled and said, "These 3, kill them at will. They want hinder a refreshing questioning sword." Then the mine board landed, and it was already heavy on that end, above the wounded centipede. After that, Qin Pingon had 3 swords in succession. One sword cut off the annual ring of the long river of time and the culprit, and the other 2 swords were aimed at the 2 fairyland monster races. At the same time, the world turned over, and Qin Pingon met several uninvited guests in the caged bird's own little world. It's like a belated demon's questioning. At that time, Qin Pingon broke the realm and entered the Jade Pure realm, as if he had just bypassed the inner demons, and the inner demons had not disappeared. Luchin was a little puzzled. It seemed that both sides of the questioning sword fell into a mysterious stillness. Luchin knew that he was not good, so he immediately shrank his sleeves and quickly pinched the tactics to calculate the matter. Good guy, this great ancestor first disciple, turned out to be a veritable sword repairman. No wonder he dared to say he wants to ask the master hermit about the sword. As for the culprit's natal flying sword, who can guess the name? But the natal supernatural powers soon came to light, similar to the Imaginer, one of the 12 high-level gods. No, it also has a part of the Echoer. Natal supernatural powers. If it is said that the feeling of loneliness of a monk on the way to the mountain, it is a single mumbling and the mountain's echo. So the so-called loneliness is looking around at the top of the mountain, muttering alone, letting you talk 1,000 words. The world has no echo and the loneliness for thousands of years. What you see in your eyes is like a demon. The true and false are confused and the false and true are uncertain. A man with the appearance of a Confucian shirt, the Qinghuang master of Ao Pingzhou Rouge County, Shenwen, sighed lightly without getting angry, but with a slightly disappointed look in his eyes. "Qin Pingan, why are you so self-disciplined? Why is it so? For that Guqin who killed the innocent?" The scroll between the world and the earth stretched out like a landscape, leaving Qin Pingan alone, walking around and looking at the flowers and re-walking the journey of the human landscape. Then there was a young monk dressed in white, holding a rosary, smiling and saying, "If the world learns from you, it is like falling into a devil's cave. Because you only need to make a mistake once, even if it's only once, you will be upset." A middle-aged man with his face gathered and dissipated, with some unabashedly gratified smiles, as if it was too difficult for the younger brother to get here, but he seemed a little disappointed, like the younger brother who came here shouldn't be such a Qin Pingon. After that, a woman in Tsing-yi finally appeared, with gentle eyes and a ponytail floating in the wind. She seemed to be looking at Qin Pingon at a distance, each silent. A cultivator, stay away from the world, live in secluded practice, love and hate together, and the heart of Tao will retreat. Finally come. Qin Pingan's dangling Taoist mind finally landed at this moment. The spring breeze follows me as the lion sounds. Qin Pingon closed his eyes, held the sword in his hand, his big sleeves waved and the spring breeze lingered. Handed out a sword that belongs to his own kendo. Jiang Shangzhen took the 9 people to travel far away with the talisman. As for the specific drawing of the talisman, it was handed over to the young master Zhao Yaoguang and Chunqing to do it. Lu Yuzhou had given a lot of the talisman paper needed to draw the talisman. Jiang Shangzhen just reminded the 9 people that this talisman must not be spread, and also said that the 3 mountain talismans' landscape taboos must be respected to Mr. Sanshan Jiuho every time he visits a mountain city. The mountains and rivers are vast and the journey is far away. It almost needs to cross the vast mountains and rivers of the world. When drawing the talisman earlier, Zhao Yaoguang smiled and asked, "Does the trail need to swear?" Jiang Shangzhen shook his head and said, "The war is coming. Since you are all gentlemen standing up, you don't need to waste your mind in the world. After that, everyone traveled far away with Amulet, and the connection between the three mountains and cities was the long river of time that Qi practitioners most wanted to touch and were the most difficult to reach. It just so happened to be able to examine the depth of the Taoism and the toughness of the body. In Jiang Shangzhen's view, apart from Chao Xiai and Fu Su, the other children are indeed a bit far behind his own Qin Shanzhu. Especially Su Bai. When he first appeared in the mountain market, he started to feel dizzy and swaying, so he was the last one to light the mountain incense. However, this young man known as Zhou Xian quickly returned to normal. It seemed that Su Bai could not turn his mind, and a vague golden text appeared around him. Jiang Shangzhen took another look at Su Bai, remembering that this kid's ancestral home seemed to be that of Zhaoling, and his ancestors were all bridge watchers of a wishing bridge, and he might have a very close relationship with the Master Su, who is a sage. Regarding good luck and luck, there is really no difference. Among the 9 people on the way across the mountain city, several small hills appeared invisibly. Chao Xiai and Yi Yufu. The 2 pure martial artists, a little like a teacher and a friend. Fu Su and Gukan brothers in the same school. A big disciple of the open mountain, a closed disciple. And the brothers are all considered good at each other. Yuan Yu, Zhao Yaoguang, and the young monk named Xumi. The 3 of them once secretly inspected the time scale of each continent, and they had a tacit understanding with each other. Chunqing Subai. Because of the relationship between the 2 parties, they have traveled to Aquarius Island together, and the relationship is not bad. After stopping in a mountain city, Chunqing asked, "How did Mr. Jiang become the chief worshipper of Luopa Mountain?" In fact, everyone present was very curious about this question. On the side of Aquarius Island, at the scene where Luopa Mountain watched Jingyang Mountain, Jiang Shangzhen appeared as the chief, and did not use the mountain blindness technique. News on the top of the mountain spread extremely fast. Even if it was separated by a world, Chunqing still knew about it. The legendary man in front of him has white temples, a long green shirt, a pair of cloth shoes, holding a green bamboo hiking stick and gently tapping his shoulder. In Chunqing's impression, the young hermit who has never dealt with is a very infatuated person, while Jiang Shangzhen of Yuquzong is a famous lover. It stands to reason that 2 cultivators of very different temperaments can't get together. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, "No coincidence is not a book. I used to fight side by side with Qin Shanzhu in a blessed place in my hometown, wade across the rivers and lakes together, meet and fall in love with each other. Belongs to the acquaintance of life and friendship." The 9 people along the way each said some secrets of cultivation that should have been carefully hidden, otherwise they would fight with the monster monks at that time, and there would be no cooperation, so they could only fight on their own. For example, in addition to the Taoist raising sword gourd named 3, Fu Su actually possessed 3 natal flying swords. Feijin wedding dress, also known as Jingsu, is the snow-white robe on his body. The flying sword shroud is like a lock sword charm that is naturally aimed at sword repair. This sword Immortal, known as Sayabadi, is the 3rd natal flying sword named Shuzhou, also known as Qiuchan. Only Chao Xiai and Yi Yufu as pure martial artists. Apart from the martial art realm, there is an end to the real peak, a mountain bottleneck, and they are in a situation where the bottleneck will not be broken. Besides, the 2 had nothing to say. In the starry sky, a thin old man and young monk were looking down on the wild land. It is Fulu Yushuan of Hedao Xinghe and Mr. Sanshan Jioho. In front of the young monk, green smoke curled up again, if there was incense burning in front of him. Yuxian Tut said astonished, "Senior, the incense is flourishing and the weather is a bit scary." Earlier, 5 sword repairmen from the Great Wall of Jianqi paid respect to Mr. Sanshan Jioho. He has both the Wenxing lineage and the colorful world, especially Na Ningyao, who is also the first person in the world. The next 9 young people include the great warrior Chao Xiai, the 2 descendants of the Baidi city and the Qingshanshen line, the Confucian Temple, the Sub-Sage line, the Dragon Tiger Mountain Tianshi Mansion, the Zhongtu Pashan Temple, the Zhongtu warrior family's ancestral line. Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism and military strategists, the 3 religions have all. There was a smile on the young monk's face. Of course it was not because of more incense, but in such a short time, 2 groups of young people showed their respect at the same time. Even he was surprised. If the 2 groups of people's respective holdings are added, wading through the mountains and rivers in the wild world will have an immeasurable and profound impact on the trends of several worlds. Yuxian said, "It seems that you have to owe it to that friend Chen Xiaodao." The young monk hesitated and nodded. Zhou Xian caressed his beard and smiled knowingly. This nod of the senior next to him is not easy. Just now, intentionally or unintentionally, Zhou Xian asked this predecessor a question. Is it because Zhilan is in charge and has to be removed? The young monk did not give an answer at the time. In a bright moon. Ningyao Qi Tingji Luji House. With the help of the moon talisman, the four sword repairmen soared up here together, standing in the dead and silent land of ancient ruins. The 3 rounds of bright moon in the barren world in the past years, the one named Yugo, was the place where the master of the Lotus Nunnery was practiced, and Dong Senging was dragged into the world by the moon. And the place of cultivating Taoism in the moon is called Toad Palace. And this bright moon in the middle, named Jin Jing, is also the only bright moon with another name, Hao Kai. Ning Yao glanced at the sky and said, I am responsible for opening the way with the sword and dealing with certain accidents. Criminal Officer Haosu was responsible for temporarily Taoizing this round of bright moon with his live's magical power of flying sword. Qi Tingji and Lu Ji are responsible for handing swords together in the same direction, pushing Mingyue along the trajectory opened by Ningyao, moving for a month and moving to the Qingming world. In the Great Wall of Sword Qi, 4 sword repairmen performed their duties. Ningyao was innocent with the fairy sword in his hand, and glanced diagonally somewhere in the sky. Then she opened the sky with one sword. A headless encounter on a narrow road. Within that inexplicable encirclement, Feng Zueto's move is a masterpiece of moving mountains and seas. Within 1,000 miles, the tops of the mountains are uprooted and the rivers are flowing. Was smashed at the monster monks who were suspended in the air. At the same time, Feng Shuetao squeezed out 2 golden talismans that had been kept for many years. The 2 talisman hung in the sleeves and circulated slowly, using the sundial to determine the time scale and the guide to determine the position of the sky. The mountains under the sky are all afraid of sword repair and annoys the formation master. They fight against the sword repair and do not take advantage. If the enemy is sitting with the formation master, it is equivalent to being trapped in a circle. Feng Shuetao has suffered a lot in the hands of these 2 types of gas trainers, many times. Feng Shuetao was not upset because of this. As a wild cultivator, he had never seen any dangerous battles, and the situation of his life after 9 deaths was more than once or twice. While testing the reality, Feng Shuetao performed a natal escape method. The figure dissipated, her figure shrank into a mustard golden light, and at the same time black smoke billowed, there was misty mist, and a white rainbow swept the air in 4 directions. Far away. No monster cultivator stopped Feng Shuetao and he simply ignored those attacking techniques. The childish monk with a sarcasm smile, grasshopper after autumn, just jump around. 10 cultivators in the wild world blocked Feng Zueto's north return. The only one who was late was Lu Bai, a sword repairer from the Yupu realm who came from Firen. With the fishtail cave sky, a robe given by her mentor, she took a shortcut to ascend to the sky and was able to suppress the demon that evolved from the bottleneck of the nascent infant realm, and successfully entered the 5 realms. Her destiny flying sword has never been made public. In the early years, it was not even recorded on the Jiazi account. Probably this is the exclusive treatment of being a close disciple. As soon as Lu Bai arrived on the scene, the big formation was able to make up, and began to collect the net for that ascending realm big fish. For times before, the 2 were their own people in the barren world, but they didn't take charge of them. They acted as the co-master of the world against Firen and dispatched the soldiers and horses of Tuyueshan. There is also a Yupu realm swordsman from the Great Wall of Sword Qi. He has been hiding in the wild world for thousands of years. The last time he made a move was to siege and kill the fairy realm cultivator who likes to pick up leaks in Hauran, and then he moved a little bit on this person, otherwise it is not just as simple as falling into Yuaning. Although the move was concealed, they didn't expect it to be successful. After all, there is a Baidi City Lord on the tattoo side, the title of the world's #1 demon road giant, which is not a big deal in the savage world. After all, even the more Dynasty Waterfall, a guy who has only been in the Ascendant realm a few days ago, has given himself a single-step road number. But Jing Juzhong, as a demon cultivator, was able to stand firm in the Hauran world, which is extremely important. Moreover, the scene that happened on Tuyue Mountain is still fresh in my memory, so the 2 worlds did not agree. After the discussion, a saying began to circulate in the wild world. Willing to take 3 ascending realm great monsters for 1 Jing Juzhong. In addition to the Baidi City Jing Juzhong, There are also the real fire dragon who once made a shot in the wild hinterland, Lu Qi who stopped after returning to Haoren's hometown, and the famous hermit Chen Pingon, together with Wu Fu Chao Ci. Totaling 10 people are regarded as the wild world most hope that the other party can change the existence of the camp. The white-robed boy smiled and said, "Hey, Sister Lu Bai is so empty today, so she has to be free? If we come here for a while, maybe we are 9, we will not be able to hold Qingmi the ascendant fish. This is not bad, the big deal is to be held accountable, but in case the secret is violent and slaughtered, we are not high in the realm of small arms and thin legs. Isn't it a dead end? Sister Lu Bai can still be regarded as our 9 saviors?" Lu Bai said indifferently, "Why don't you teach you one more thing? When yin and yang talk strangely, you have to look serious, otherwise you will only appear glib." The young man in a snow-white robe had a snow-white mask on his face, 2 large sleeves hanging straight down, and his alias was Chuyun. He was a pure swordsman in the mountain realm with a narrow sword hanging on his waist. The narrow and long saber is called DG, and the narrow sword that Qin Ping received in the Great Wall of Jianqi Jikhan is an ancient treasure of almost a generation. In the ancient heaven, the executioner of one of the 12 high-ranking gods, and the 4 officials of the prison Xiaoguan Jinyun, took charge of the dragon-slashing platform, which was specially used for the family of the dragons, and Qiuguan Baiyun was responsible for the execution of Lei Qi. Qiuyun sighed. "Hey, Sister Lu Bai is still knowledgeable, and she deserves to be the unnamed Taoist companion of our hidden officer." The white-robed boy suddenly slapped himself. "Look at my broken mouth, which one can I open or lift which one?" Lu Bai was silent. The young man stopped provoking and provocative, his eyes gleaming, and he muttered to himself, "I don't know if Chao Ci has a false reputation." The bamboo is still the same with the sword on its back and the long swords densely clustered. The picture is like a peacock on the screen. He missed the years of Jiaoshan account a bit, and at any rate there was a clog that could convince the crowd, that is, today's Zhou Qinggao. This group of Tiangong cultivators, one by one, is not normal than the other. These years they have gathered a bunch of them, and they are on the side of Firen, a little more honest. The monk who looked like a child was named Yupu. A cotton bag hanging on the waist, the 4 characters for ancient seals, Fu Shan Lu Hai. Inside the bag are a considerable number of Fu Lu, said to be the relics of the Yufu Palace, but also a token of the palace lord. Together with Fu Lu, the threshold is high, and as long as the aptitude is good enough, it can consume more gold and silver mountains than ordinary sword repairs. Therefore this monster Fu Lu monk named Yupu admires Lu Jubao of Aizhou most and admires the wealth of the god of wealth. After all, on the way of Fu Lu, if you want to reach the top, immortal money is simply not money. There was a woman with a golden bead in her ear. The light was soft, and the ripples of the water pattern reflected the woman's face with a clear boundary. Her name is Jindan. The tall man had a dull look, with a pair of small axes hanging from his waist, holding a lantern that could lead his soul to the dark land. His name is Yuan Ying. In addition, a man with a bamboo pole hanging gourd on his shoulders was named Fish Vegetarian. Good at contemplating Taoism, imagining gods, being able to turn mud into horses and turn water into empty boats. In addition, Yusu and Yupu are equally proficient in talisman, throwing talisman to control mountain ghosts and water descendants. The slender woman standing side by side is Yusu's younger sister. She has a slender waist, carrying a huge bow, a slender hand, and constantly spinning the dagger. The name is Slender. Like Chuyun, in addition to being a trainer, he is a pure martial artist. The beauty is as thin as a plum, and the plum is as thin as a poem. Jiang Shangzhen's mind attached to Senior Qingmi's body, did not idle, glanced at the woman's chest and couldn't help saying silently, "Kumquats are also oranges." The other one didn't know whether to call sister or aunt, but he had a completely different style. He was graceful and good-natured. It's a pity that the woman who slanted her back with a piano bag has a mask on her face and can't see her face. It was the Dao Fa scene that appeared behind this female luthier. It was a bit too infiltrating, with countless ghosts hanging, and a corpse hanging in the air, not touching the sky or the ground. Holding a fan painted thousands of ladies, all with beautiful faces and boned bodies, which seemed even more unsightly than the terrifying ghost. This woman is good at weaving dreams, visualizing an indefinite river, dismantling countless people in dreams during Spring Festival. After putting on the mask, the mental state appeared behind him, and the countless hanged corpses were suspended in the air. This is also one of the magical powers of Fijian's life. It can make time hover. Death is a big sleep. Sleeping is a small death. And her natal flying sword is actually that Guqin, and the flying sword is named Jingguan. Jiang Shangzhen does not yet know that her name is Ziwameng, the name of spring festival. Jiang Shangzhen was a bit embarrassed for Senior Qingmi. Several little bunnies who are at most in the Yupu realm, dared to besieged and killed a wild Xiao origin, the most familiar ascending realm boss. Wouldn't it be broken again? Feng Shuatao smiled bitterly, not at all funny. Feng Shuatao had the magical powers of a great monk in the ascending realm. Even if the voices of those close at hand were extremely clear, they were only a few minutes away, but there was a distance between heaven and earth. Within the big formation, those monster monks who are not high in realm are not imaginary, but every time the opponent makes a shot, it takes advantage of the time and place. Moreover, within the heavens and the earth, visions flourish, the sun rises and the moon sets, the stars move and the day and night move. Spring thunder bursts, rain falls from the sky, mountains and rivers emerge from the clouds, and then the day and night cycle, the 4 seasons flow year after year, day after day. The day is exhausted and the bright clouds will disappear. The stars are as bright as the river at night, and accompanied by the dragon palace the spring rain is aquatic. The clouds are raining, the stars are in the autumn dew, the flames are steaming, the image is clear, the autumn is clear, the snow is flying, the vegetation grows. Many scenes are changing and it is dizzying. The key is that every time the 4 seasons flow, Feng Zuido's 1-year Taoism will be invisibly consumed, making Feng Zuido's hard work in the ascendant realm, like a leaky pot with a hole. No way can stop the water in the pot from passing by. In an instant the mountains and rivers changed color, as if they had become an ink painting with only black and white left, making Feng Shuatao more and more like falling clouds. Fortunately, the guy who claimed to have the title of Broken True Monarch once again sounded his heart, and pointed Feng Shuatao to take the Chengsusi southeast route and move to a rustic and rich place. Be sure to avoid a flash of fire or you will fall into the orb. The danger of falling into the furnace. Sure enough, except for the place where Feng Shuatao hurriedly went to the place where he stood, the rest of the world has become a scene of spreading fire, which is not just the end of a year spent by the big array. Then there was a big river with a wide surface out of thin air. Jiang Shangzhen reminded again. Senior Qing's secret. Don't be stunned, continue to take the move, this is the virtual phase of Fen. Yufeng rushes over, don't care about anything. Just remember to pinch the time, calculate the distance, run for thousands of miles, no much more. After stopping you can welcome the next attacking spell. Not surprisingly, you can also see a mirage similar to the Imperial Palace. Trapped in a maze, don't panic, I will continue to lead the way for Senior. Feng Shuatao kept fighting the wind and asked in his heart, dare to ask fellow Daoists, why is this? Jiang Shangzhen said helplessly, as Senior ascended, he hasn't read a few books at such an age? What is he doing for thousands of years? Feng Shuatao was dumb. Jiang Shangzhen had to wait patiently and said, don't Bai Yujing's 3 masters have a story about the day and the earth? They have already broken the secret. Take advantage of the white cloud as for the emperor's hometown. In addition, there is another poem on Fenshang, saying that the north wind blows the white clouds. Wanli crossing the Fen River. Feng Shuatao asked, why didn't the other party use his hands and feet on the journey? Jiang Shangzhen rolled his eyes and said, the journey on the Great Road is clear. These are just young boys who use the time to operate the Taoist law. Now they are not high in realm. How dare you to be superfluous, and if you are not careful you will expose flaws and be caught by the secrets. Senior seized the opportunity and escaped to life. Maybe he could still take away a few heads for battle. Like this heaven and earth, in the final analysis, there is still no way to escape the blinding avenue. It is not the sight in the eyes that is really blinded, but the perception of the consciousness of the Senior Qingmi. Otherwise, these guys can really change the 4 seasons between heaven and earth. So Senior's sundial and guide symbols are not meaningless. On the contrary, they are the most meaningful. They are even more important than the Dao Fa of a senior. By the way, how many are still in Senior's pocket? You can take them out. Chatting with Senior Qingmi is strenuous. I miss the years of fighting side by side with the good mountain lord and brother Cui more and more. Where such a waste of saliva is necessary, at most it is a matter of staring. Feng Shuatao said with a face, just these 2. Huh. Stu. Isn't the predecessor an ascended realm great monk? So shabby when you're out. Jiang Shangzhen really admired the courage of this ascended realm great monk. Following Senior Aliang to the wild world. Seniors, you really are traveling all the way to the mountains and water? Feng Shuetao was speechless. But after that, as the true monarch said in a misty imperial pavilion, Feng Shuetao was able to walk through the corridors skillfully, like the master strolling in the courtyard. Unable to help but ask said, "A Taoist fellow is proficient in one hexagram? I'm not proficient now, I'm using it now." The sage said that the gentleman is unfaithful. Besides, I am the most unbelieving person, so I am holding the Buddha's foot temporarily and only burn incense when I enter the temple. Friend said and laughed. You are not afraid that I am the 10th person who hasn't appeared yet. My gambling luck has always been good, and my instinct has been amazing in this life. When Feng Shuetao was young, he was in a market gambling house and met a worldly expert who later led him to climb the mountain and do the path. At the gambling table, Feng Shuetao won 9 out of 10 bets, but he lost money every time he left the gambling house. The gambling luck is very good, the gambling skills are not good. The Immortal leader said that this is a fate of Taoism and lack of skills, but because he is not learning and skillless, so he is most suitable for cultivation, otherwise he is violent. However, the Immortal leader didn't accept him as a disciple in the end, saying that he had a poor life and could not bear Feng Shueto's kowtow. Jiang Shangzhen suddenly shouted, "Quickly survey the small world of the human body, and be careful of flying swords running through it." Feng Shuetao hurriedly patrolled Zhou Xian, but he was still unable to stop him. A ray of sword energy instantly smashed many orifice points. Fortunately, Feng Shuetao finally came up with more countermeasures in time. It was just some of the barren countryside of the world, but almost it's about to hit the 2 neighboring natal acupoints. In fact, the door has been found by the ray of sword energy. I probably don't feel confident to break the Qi Palace, and I am unwilling to fight face to face with a defensive ascendant mind. He broke through the mountain and water barrier in an instant, and withdrew from Feng Shueto's personal world. Feng Shuetao glanced at the exit of the sky curtain of his family's world. It was Fijians and he was very worried. If he didn't look closely, there would be no trace of the wound. No matter how subtle Jianxia's natal flying sword enters the enemy's physical world, it will logically become as big as a mountain. Jiang Shangzhen was a little bit lost. It's a pity that I am not here, otherwise with those stacks of locksword charms, I would really have a chance to catch turtles in the urn. Once again preaching for the preaching of the predecessor Qing Mi. It is a natal flying sword of the woman's sword repair Lu Bai. It was temporarily named Mustard Seed by the hermit on the side of the Summer Palace. This weird flying sword is unclear. The rank is very high. Being able to truly integrate with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, such as a leaf in the middle of a big lake. The air trainer is like an ordinary master standing on the shore. Of course it is invisible to the naked eye. Family Daoist is a sword fairy from the Great Wall of Jianqi, hidden in the wild world waiting for opportunities. This master hermit, who has no origin for the time being, claimed to be a true monarch and sounded like a man in the door. But since he knew everything about the secrets of the Summer Palace, he was probably a real sword fairy. Senior Qing Mi must have never been to the 3 continents east of the Hauran world. Otherwise, the name of the younger generation will have a reputation there, and the reputation in the mountains is fair. It is a famous old way and Renxia is inspiring. Feng Shuetao was puzzled. He was still an expert in the awe-inspiring world and playing in the world. Why should fellow Taoists take risks? With this strange man who claimed to have collapsed the true monarch for no reason, there is no reason to help himself in this way. I am used to the slant of the sword, seeking wealth and wealth. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, besides, meeting is fate. Senior is the first fellow I met in this wild journey. If I don't save myself, I am worried that I will be struck by lightning. Feng Shuetao said solemnly, if Feng Shuetao can get out of the trap this time, I dare not say anything. The mountains are high and the rivers are long, the Daoists just wait and see. A sincere promise made by a soaring Jingyexiu is worth a little money. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and said, it's easy to talk and talk. I have a very good style at the top of the mountain. I have always had the habit of showing kindness and not reporting. After that, there was a period of long years of danger and suffering. Those weird things that are circulating in the market always like to talk about that day on the ground, or else they will be a mountain in the mountains. The world has been thousands of years. Never thought that Jiang Shangzhen really ran into him today. Just like the stream of time in this small world, it passed extremely fast in the lake of hearts of Zhou Xian and Feng Shuetao. It's a pity not to be ecstatic, because with him, it is an out-and-out big master. In addition to dealing with those weird attacking techniques, you must keep your spirits up. In addition, in order to play Luminosine, both parties talk about everything. It is mainly Jiang Shangzhen asking Qing secret answers, which is equivalent to the 2 Jiazi time has passed. The 18th generation of the ancestor of the young secret predecessor had several confidants how to know each other, how to see the right eye. I have found out clearly. Feng Shuetao said helplessly, if I continue to consume it like this, I'm afraid I will fall into a trap. The fight was really aggrieved. According to fellow Beng's Daoist, this great formation fixed celestial phenomena, dharma and earth's rituals, and yin and yang depended on that day that began in the North Pole, and the ground rises from Tuyue Mountain. If it were the 10 monster monks, the realm would be higher. For example, to be able to enter the fairyland at least for everyone, that is a full 3,600 years, the sun, the moon and the 5th latitude cycle, after a few random times, I am afraid that except for the 14th level cultivator, the ascension level cultivator will fall in an instant. In the long river of time. Where did the savage world get together so many young monks with magical powers and able to form a formation to steal the good fortune of the world? Don't panic. Jiang Shangzhen smiled and comforted. Feng Shui takes turns and soon there will be 10 people to 10 people, and it's Senior Qingmi to watch the show. Because of his true body, he has brought the young man who has brought the awe-inspiring world with him on his way here. According to Cui Dongshan, the 3 worlds of Haoran, barbarians and Qingming each have a fairy cave and a golden jade jungle. The younger generation will take advantage of the trend. Lizhu Dongtian will not go to talk about it. Jiang Shangzhen will never go to Huaihuang County to wander around every time he goes to Luopa Mountain to send money. In terms of courage, Jiang Shang is really not a young man, but every time he is on the side of Luopa Mountain, the dignified chief, he almost never walks down the mountain. So Jiang Shang really admired the boy in Tsing-yi from the bottom of his heart, saying that Chen Lingjun had a bite and gained wisdom, and that Chen Lingjun did not have a long memory at all. In addition, the dynasty in the Qingming world is one of the few behemoths. The country is stretched and has a deep heritage. In the several cities of Jiangyi Prefecture where the children of the founding lords are placed, there are a large number of kings and grandchildren in fresh clothes. Shang is known as the 5 Tombs Boy, the rice thief King Yuanlu and the knife hunter Chigu. All of them have their household registrations. In addition, earlier there were actually 2 genius monks who had practiced mountaineering earlier, both of whom were among the 3,000 Taoists who rushed to the colorful world. They were named Yuran and Nanshan. Now they are both in the Yuaning realm and this pair of ancestors was born and killed. The men and women of the door are not only born in the same year, the same month and the same day, but also the time is the same. It is a perfect match. In the barren world, the inferior blessed land named Lingshuang Fudi, in addition to the bamboo scraps that Lu Cha took away from his hometown, there are also 2 young demon swordsmen who are also among the 100 sword immortals of Tuyue Mountain and many others. The avenue can be expected to Immortal. Lizhu Cave, the 5 tombs of the dynasty and the blessed land, these 3 places are veritable small places, but they are so unreasonable. The 10 Tiangon monks joined hands to block Feng Zueto's retreat. This was just one thing and besieged and killed the monk on the top of the mountain. This is the gap between only looking at the embryos of a continent of mountains and rivers, and looking at the whole world to search for the geniuses of Taoism. 2 teenagers in white clothes with their big sleeves hanging straight down have already put on their masks and smiled. Ao Ran embroiders a tiger. It is really pitiful and sad. It is difficult for a clever woman to cook without rice. With the power of a country and a continent, the earthly branch that has worked hard, in the end he couldn't even find a weighty pure martial artist. Na Yupu smiled and said, I have the ability to say such things in front of the hermit. Qiu Yin laughed and said, if the hidden official is present, I must change the wording. Fortunately, I have accumulated a lot of bullshit, but unfortunately I can't see each other. There used to be 2 fights. The white-robed boy saw it sincerely and was most concerned. One was the close disciple of Tuo Yueshan Dezu Jianxiu Lizhen and Qin Pingyan's fight, and then there was a pure martial artist who met on the battlefield. Ask each other punches. Jin has a senior that is Ho Kiman. He was once the best swordsman in the far-flung world. I like to show off that fancy heavy treasure, wearing a bright red chain mail, a purple gold crown and 2 long-tailed pheasant lings. This ancient set of treasures is called a sword cage. It is both offensive and defensive. It can be regarded as a semi-fairy rank. Lock sword charm. It's a pity that Zhou Xian was on the battlefield of the Great Wall of Xianxia. He was short-lived. Not only did he fail to make achievements, but he also failed to take the opportunity to break through. After his death he became a big joke. In the end he was possessed by an old throne big demon, running his supernatural powers and possessed Zhou Xian, who was originally trying to break through and fight for martial arts. He regarded him as an abandoned son. In exchange for the serious injury of the young hermit on the battlefield. In the eyes of his junior, his death was so hopeless. The key is that apart from the set of sword cages that were not picked up by the hidden officer, in accordance with Zhou Xian's rules, they were returned to him as a junior and there was no benefit. In the big formation only Lu Bai and Zhu Qi always showed up because the last monk of heaven and dry was the place where the formation world was. Her name is Lian Ming. A woman with a height of several feet appeared, with a long skirt waving the ground, and her surroundings were full of radiance. She and the 9 monks said, "A mountain about 60,000 miles away, there is a group of lucky outsiders." Chuyun was silent for a moment and suddenly asked with hot eyes, "Is there any hidden official or Chao Ci?" "There is Chao Ci." A large formation of heaven and earth was first forcibly opened by one person with a fist. A man in white appeared. After the registration number, Chao Ci nodded and smiled and asked, "Is something wrong with me?" The white-robed boy blinked and asked with a smile in a negotiating tone, "Can it be all right?" In the wild world there are bamboo scraps Lu Bai Chuyun Yusu Tiaoyu Ziwameng Jindan Yuaning Yupu Lianing. In the vast world there are Chao Ci Fu Su Yuan Yao Gukan Yu Yufu Chunqing Zhao Yaoguang Su Mi and Su Bai. Of course there is also Jiang Shangzhen who is holding a hiking stick, shook the green bamboo stick to Feng Xuetao and shouted, "Senior Qing Mi, in the true monarch of the collapse the younger generation is too late to save." Feng Xuetao saw the true face of the failed fellow Daoist, and was stunned for a long time, first laughed out loud and then cursed Jiang Shangzhen. This surnamed Jiang, when he traveled to Beiju Luzhou in his early years, he claimed to be a direct disciple of Zhongtu Qingmi. He was really deceived by many fairies so that as long as the fire dragon travels to Zhongtu Shenzhou he has to find the big head. Feng Xuetao recounts the past. Of course recounting the past is false and playing the autumn wind is true. Chao Ci said, "Then there is nothing to do." The whole world shook violently and it turned out that Chao Ci had already punched. Bai Zhe squatted down on the other side of the river, spread a palm and lightly placed it on the ground. Fei Fei was shocked to find that her heart was not even Dao Xin, and there was a shock involuntarily. Then there was the whole barren world like a dull sound of a sleeper's heart beating. There were several old and fierce auras. Like several long-term hibernators, slowly waking up in the season of horror. Bai Zhe said solemnly, "Don't sleep anymore. Fei Fei is full of spirits." Bai Zhe suddenly raised his head and smiled, "Stay away from me, the farther the better." Because Bai Zhe's move was equivalent to a questioning sword. There is no way in the barren world at the moment now the one who can best carry Qin Kingda's sword is himself. The same young rising or the nominal world co-master, Jian Xiufiren, and the 14th level Xiao Deng are not good. Fei Fei said nothing after listening to Bai Zhe's reminder. She tried her best to use the magical powers of water, and she could run as far as she could. Bai Zhe stood up and showed his face. A sword light came in an instant. After the sword the earth was shattered, and Bai Zhe Faxiang was hit by the sword light more than 1,000 miles deep in the earth. It's just a half-sword. This half-sword comes from the Great Wall of Jianqi. There are also the remaining half of the sword that was originally angrily fighting the bull, as if it had landed on the earth from the outside of the sky. Bai Zhe's Faxiang just stretched out his huge hands and placed them on the vast ground beyond the well. Bai Zhe was struck deeper into the earth by that half-sword. Bai Zhe was almost stunned by the sword light, and together he completely penetrated the wild world. Sword of Coming Chapter 865. Dragging down the river boundary is like being opened up to a brand new hall of heroes, floods pouring crazily into it, and then being stirred by the majestic sword energy in it, clouds and mists suddenly evaporate. In the nearby tributaries, the water level of the river dropped instantly, and the riverbed was exposed again. This is the second time. Numerous water spirits fled to the shore, migrating frantically, just to stay away from the huge hole that surged into the sky. The Xian sword flowed out like a huge wave, spreading to the surroundings. A vast water area that fell down the main river channel and dozens of nearby tributaries died in the earthquake and the sword chi torrent, the genus of the water descent. There are countless. The power of a sword, the sky collapses. Qin Qing stood on the edge of the top of the cave, frowning, and asked, "What's the matter?" In theory, Bai Zhe shouldn't be so weak. The so-called weak, of course, is only compared to the great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain in the Peak State. If Bai Zhe is too weak, Qin Qing has done so with all his strength. Why choose Bai Zhe? That is not to bury Bai Zhe but to abuse oneself. As for Bai Zhe, he didn't evade, he deliberately carried half the sword. Probably considered a long-term reunion after 10,000 years. Bai Zhe's last respect to the Great Wall of Jianqi and Qin Qingdu. And the result of the sword-handing that Qin Qing really wanted was to prevent and delay Bai Zhe's entry into the 15th realm to a certain extent, a few decades or 100 years later. Just like now in Bai Zhe's personal world, there is still a sword chi gully that seems to cut the earth. Bai Zhe has to fill it slowly if he wants to enter the 15th realm. The problem is, it seems that Bai Zhe does not mean this at all. Are you planning to have the 15th realm? Have the intention to act again? First to make way for the great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain, and this time to make way for the rising? Still more long-term for the nominal new wild communist master sword repaired brilliantly, make room early? Qin Qing rubbed his chin. If he knew this before, wouldn't it be better to change to the first grade as the direction of handing the sword? A snow-white rainbow light swept from the bottom of the hole, and finally Bai Zhe and Qin Qing stood opposite each other. The first sentence turned out to be, "Would you like to have a pot of wine?" Qin Qing shook his head. "Horan, there is no good wine in the world." Bai Zhe looked around, his eyes were devastated and a pitiful river fell. The hidden official and the old sword fairy shot twice and hit the pond fish twice in a row. Qin Qing said with a smile, "At least before I leave, you don't even think about remedying it. You have been hiding the dirt in the river for many years. For thousands of years, the savage world has attacked the Great Wall of Sword Qi Filuo and Xiandan City, and other places have been very vigorous. If you don't fall again and again, it will be more or less interesting. Even if you can't stop it before, it will be a little bit small. There are prawn soldiers and crabs who are proficient, go to the Great Wall of Jianqi to show off their might. Otherwise, in the cage of the old deaf child, there will be no such loach Qingqiu. The demon race of the 5 realms on this head was once one of the 4 evils of the Luluo River. Bai Zhe looked at the old sword fairy on the other side, feeling a little sad. Used to be old friends who fought side by side in the past. For thousands of years, the deceased gradually passed away. Qin Qing all smiled freely. "Don't be so hypocritical, you're right, you belonged to Bai Zhe, the most sentimental back then, more human than human." Bai Zhe asked, "Why not follow that person to the Western Buddhist country and leave a ray of life for yourself?" The middle-aged monk who appeared at the head of the city earlier is the Buddha. The 3 souls of heaven, earth and man after death, each has a place of refuge. Lu Xun was on the way to travel far away with Qin Pingon holding a symbol, and once revealed the secret of heaven. Among them the heaven's soul went to the heaven. The place where the soul of the earth goes, is the ghost mansion of the capital city of the Dark Land. Heaven and earth nourishes all things, how can they repay the world? The 2 souls of heaven and earth are like paying off debts. Only a human soul wanders the world with 7 souls, and this soul flies without 7 souls. Therefore the folk market has the saying that the 7 souls are resurrected, and the shelter of the ancestors also comes from this. The so-called cultivating souls are actually extremely difficult to capture, all the 3 souls and 7 souls, especially the 2 souls of heaven and earth, which is more like an illusion that is difficult for monks to distinguish. The sea of bitterness is sinking and the dust is full. Why is the matter of cultivating Taoism regarded as an act of rebellion by stealing identity? The monks of the Taoism, proving the Tao for longevity, practicing all kinds of longevity and long-sighted methods, not to mention the reincarnation of many secret methods inherited by soldiers, and the ancestors' hall lighting a life-renewing lamp. One by one, all are invisible by the heavens. Overwhelming things. The Buddha appeared at the Great Wall of Sword Qi at the time. One of the things he wanted to see was Qin Qingdu's last soul. In Bai Zhe's view, if Qin Qingdu himself is willing, it is very likely that he can reincarnate in the Western Buddhist kingdom. Qin Qing laughed and said, "I am afraid of death and greedy for life, so I should be a sword repairer." The villain died for profit, the hero died for justice, and the saint died for justice. Sword repair is to kill the sword. To reward the world, Guchuan will die. Since the wish has been given, Fei Xingcheng has established a firm foothold in a brand new world, so we will leave the future right and wrong to young people. Chen Qing laughed and said, take a pick before 10,000 years and remedy it after 10,000 years. Are you taking off your pants and farting? Bai Zhe said, you have to protect the incense of sword repair not to be cut off, and I can't worry about the survival of the wild world. The implication is that if Howren wants to conquer the wilderness, he has to pass the level of Bai Zhe. Bai Zhe no longer likes war and he will never watch the wild world fall away. Qin Qing laughed and said, neither pursues the 15th realm but is so confident. Remember that Bai Zhe in the impression is not the one who likes to talk big, then it is the 14th realm of Hedao you lived thousands of years ago. Learned a lot? Bai Zhe smiled and said nothing. The two sides really haven't gotten to the point of being so open and honest. In the beginning, countless gods high in the sky fell. The ruins of the old heaven became a land of no masters that could not be broken, but also extremely difficult to occupy. In addition, a few worlds just took shape but only a few masters of the world. There is a conclusion. For example, the ancestor of the three teachings, there is nothing to dispute, only the wild world. There are still some variables. Bai Zhe rising, one is to have absolute prestige and strength, one is to have the spirit and realm, and they can later. The great ancestor of Tuiushan broke off his wrist. It's just that Bai Zhe followed the great ancestor to climb the mountain, helped to name Tuiyue Mountain and gave the child a real name, which means that Bai Zhe recognized the great ancestor's identity as the world co-lord. The old ancestors can't choose one or two. What's more, the savage world is tentatively set, and the early rise is not willing to fight inwardly so that other worlds have a chance, so the heart is completely dead, but still unwilling to be sent under the fence. He ran to open up had a hall of heroic spirits and confronted Tuiyue Mountain. The remaining small group of peak monsters who were injured in the war, in order to heal their injuries, gradually fell into hibernation. Those who were able to wake up from hibernation later on their own, relying on their tyrannical body and extremely high realm of Taoism without exception, became the great demon of the old throne, occupying a place in the Hall of Valor. For example, Zhu Wei, the ancestor who moved to the mountain and the owner of the Lotus Temple, occupy the center of the bright moon golden mirror, and refine it into a monastic site. Huang Luan began to gather the relics of various caves, heaven and blessed land and fairy palace mansions. After Yang Ji woke up, he caught sight of the Fuluo River that was cut out by Jian Xiu's sword. In addition, the old thrones Lu Cha and Fei Fei are actually juniors compared to the ancient demon. Especially the extremely young sword repair Lu Cha, a bit similar to the one in the wild world of swordsmanship. Wait until Lu Cha was imprisoned in a mysterious landscape in Gongdalin, and the world's air transport, including the sword, was transferred to Fei Ran invisibly. Before leaving Howren World, Bai Zhe made a special trip to Gongdalin to find Lu Cha. The Confucian temple even only allowed Mao Xiaodong to accompany him symbolically. Can be seen from this that Bai Zhe is indeed overwhelmed. It is the great swordsman who fishes there every day. After his kendo achievements of senior, Bai Zhe stopped in a foreign land. Lu Cha only said a word. Let Howren lose the 14th realm of stability. In fact, I don't lose much. It can be seen from this that Lu Cha firmly believes that Qin Chunan, the pillar of the sub-sage line, can definitely enter the 14th stage if he does not die under his sword, and it is extremely fast, not necessarily slower than the Fulu Yushuan of the Hedao galaxy. Once Qin Chunan, who carried the sun and the moon, successfully combined the 14 realms, the consequences would be disastrous for the wild world. Is not only an unquestionable harmony between people and Tao, but also has the profoundness of harmony in the sky and the advantages of location, coupled with Qin Chunan's own Confucian sages and supernatural powers. Such a 14 realm, the combat power is quite terrible. It should be known that at the head of the Great Wall of Jianqi, before Dong Sanging, Qin Chunan had dragged the bright moon of the Lord of Hehua Temple. Qin Qing all smiled and said, if I change into that little master, I will convince the most holy master that no matter how we must join hands to kill you, there will be absolutely no future troubles. Like Dong Sangjing's grandson Jianxiu Dongguan Waterfall, Qin Qingdu is actually very pleasing to the eye, and he had high hopes for his kendo. Like should kill or kill. Then it is not a sacrament. Bai Zhe shook his head and said, besides, I am not so easy to kill. The reason why Baizé was willing to give way to the great ancestor of Tuya Mountain was not because he believed that he was hopeless and within reach of the 15 realms, but once Baizé broke the realm at that time, it had too much influence on the entire wild world, and the situation eventually evolved. Will go against the great road in Baizé's heart. Baizé once hoped that the rules of the Little Master's saints would enable the Hauran human race and the wild monster race to work together to create a peaceful and prosperous world in which both parties are safe and sound. This involves the magic of ancient times that rained down on the world, and the avenue of Yaozi's cultivation was fundamental, because there was one more crucial refining link than the human race, which formed a threshold between the monster and the monks blocking the earth. The countless demon tribes' resuscitation above is an inherent disadvantage, but once the demon tribe monk succeeds in refining because of the toughness of the real body, it will have an acquired advantage. The ancestors who created the Hall of Valor have just ascended, and their original intention was to try to spread thousands of spells through the preaching matter, so that the monks of the monster race would spring up like bamboo shoots after the rain and spring up in the earth. I hope that the wild ants can become the wild dragons and snakes and finally create them. A group of air trainers who were known as Earth Immortals in ancient times. So there is Dao ancestor riding a bull to pass the test, which is to look for the first rise and learn Dao. Once the mountain climbing monks in the wild world, there is no door difference, there is no threshold to practice, and finally the monks can easily study various techniques, and they will have the opportunity to achieve the extremely grand vision in their hearts. Realize, only the monks of the demon race, the innate flesh is sanctified, and the acquired spells are like gods. If it's just that the number of demon clan trainers is as large as a stream, it's good to say that the real problem lies in the demon clan in the wild world. Among the several worlds, it is most likely to have the strength and the most ambition and the existence of the richest killing nature, killing, annexing, invading, plundering, the endless pursuit of the infinite power of a single individual without any constraints. If we only talk about the ability to fight against each other in the Ascension realm, it is not only the vast and hard-fought world, but also the wild and wild. The same is true for the Qingming world and the Western Buddha countries. Just like in the eyes of the monster monks in the wild world, there is a lot of Juzhou, there are Xingzhongzhong, there are peak monks such as Longhushan Zhao Tianlai and Hulong Zhenren, which are accidents. Whenever they talk about it, most of them have to add even. And criminal officer Haosu was listening to Lu Chen talking about the Battle of Xiandan City, and the city lord Xuanpu was killed in a stick of incense. It would be surprising. I can't believe that there is such a sparsely ascended great demon in the wild world. Is also the Hauran monk Nan Guangzhao in the Ascension realm. Haosu's head was beheaded at the mountain gate of his sect. It was almost impossible to fight back. This criminal officer was not surprised at all. Mountain monks outside the wild world, when dealing with the matter of cultivation, they will not deliberately avoid fighting, but the pursuit of the road is still immortal with the world. The savage world is a completely different customs. It seems that since the birth of the monster race, it is for self-existence, and it does not hesitate to bring all the destruction outside of the individual. The practice, refining and climbing are purely fighting, tirelessly grabbing. To put it simply, survival requires eating, and practice is for a greater degree of fruit belly. Every time you ascend you can eat more beings from heaven and earth. If there is another big demon deliberately doing it, open up a shortcut to mountaineering and lead the demon to this path. So few worlds will be engulfed in them, the war will continue and the lives will be destroyed. And the original intention of the ancestors to establish the Hall of Heroes was to allow a 15th realm, such as Baizé, to bring a dozen 14th realm and a large number of upper 5 realm monks, trying to bring the whole world together into a world. Once Baizé is in that 15th realm, even if those 14th realm cultivators are rebellious, they must obey Baizé's orders obediently. At that time, under the leadership of Baizé, you can open a door that connects the two worlds at will and swim far together, enough to pierce through any world and then come slowly to eat away. So the first rise has actually found Baizé privately, and is willing to honor Baizé as the leader of the demon clan, hoping that Baizé can lead the demon clan to the top. Because Baizé possesses a God-given supernatural power, he has the real name of all the monster races in the world. Very simple, Baizé will pick one for you directly. It's a pity that Baizé refused. Later it was the Wenjian Tua Yueshan led by Qin Qingdu. In order to escape Daozu he had to travel far away. Because as long as they can't agree, the thousands of monks in the Qingming world will surely fall on the wild land like a majestic rain from the sky. Among the ancestors of the three teachings, Taoist ancestors are recognized as the worst-tempered and the most able to fight. In that unrecorded battle, it was the young Taoist priest who stood up to the ground, holding the majestic body of the first ancestor of the soldier in his hand, and smashed at the sword repairman again and again. Bai Zhe said, I deliberately let go of Jiuquan sect and Diue Qingshan, no like in Baihua City, Xiandan City, Fililuo and Tuyue Mountain. Tingji followed suit all the way. Except for when Lu Ji was drinking in Jiuquan sect, some monks got excited and hacked her to death. In addition, there was no disturbance in the two places. Qin Qing laughed and said, this last hermit should be soft-hearted. The young Xianxia was brilliant. He once said from the bottom of his heart that the mountains and the mountains of the world are always well protected by the silent powerhouses. The great monks who have been to Tianwai will inevitably have a similar feeling. Every world is like a ferry that travels far away in Taishu. All living beings board and disembark, come and go. Bai Zhe seemed to remember something and suddenly said, the previous discussion was on the side of the Confucian temple. At that time I listened to the sword repairer Lin Junbai in the summer palace and chatted with a few friends at the door. There was a question which was quite interesting. I had to take a test. The boss of the school exam, the sword fairy. Qin Qing sneered and said, come less. Bai Zhe said to himself. Lin Junbai said that he was in the summer residence in his early years. Qin Pingon once asked him a question about why the Great Wall of Jianqi could stand for thousands of years. Lin Junbai used this question to ask his friends. Qin Qing frowned and said, it's not the only thing that sword repairers fight the best fight? Bai Zhe smiled and said, in this way the boss Xian can't enter the summer residence. Qin Qing laughed heartily. Bai Zhe gave the answer. Not Haoren. Qin Qingdu nodded lightly after holding his hands. These few words are indeed more soothing than any pleasant words. Bai Zhe sighed, just leave. Qin Qing smiled and said, otherwise? Do you want to beat the gongs and drums? What's more, the Great Wall of Sword Qi, which has been standing in the sky for thousands of years, is the best tomb for sword repair. It will sleep here forever and will not be lonely. In the future, every time the young sword repairman in Feixingcheng handed the sword to the world, it would be a remote sacrifice without going to the grave. On the tattoo side, the sunlight from the previous wild world gathered in an instant, like a sword light falling to the ground, besieging the entire tattoo, continuously gathering and shrinking the boundary, and the place where the beam of light passes, whether it is living or dead, all turned into powder flying. Thus, in addition to the pay cup of the Bigduan woman Valkyrie Huayin, one of the 10 people in the Middle-earth, Taishishin Guaoding Luxia, the lord of Friao Tianyao Township, and Luxia's a female fairy Zhou Xian etc., all have one place. One after another shot to block that beam of light. Only Jing Juzhong neither showed up nor shot as if he was out of the picture. Fortunately, he finally stopped the golden beam of light. The tattooed monk did not lose much. Zhou Xian, who had exhausted her spells and consumed a lot of magic weapons, sighed. Who tossed it out scared someone to death. This fairy from Luxiazu smiled bitterly, putting away a red-yellow morning glow. She raised her hand, spread her palms, and her bones were thick, but in fact her 2 arms were not much better. They were bloody like a blunt knife. If you have cold meat you will have a lot of robes on your body. Zhou Qian is the younger sister of sect master Qin Zhao. She also owns a Song AI blessed land, and her position in the sect is actually similar to Jiang Shangzhen of UQ sect. Although senior brother Qin Zhao is also a fairyland cultivator, whether it is the ability to catch opponents and fight, or the reputation in Haoren, they are far inferior to Zhou Qian. Take out a porcelain bottle from the sachet filled with glowing rays of light on the waist. Apply a rare plaster that can be white bones and raw meat on the hand, and then the colorful clouds flow around the palm of the hand, and the injury is healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. A beautiful woman Yufeng rushed over and said anxiously, "Sister, okay?" This Conqian's younger sister, named Yu Rui, is now an outsider of the sect, because she has long been married to the cave master of Tianyu Dongtian. Yu Yes realm of Rui is not high, she is still a Yupu realm with money anyway, her man is rich. She is a famous mountain beauty. She wears a jasper flower crown all year round. As for her robe, it is said that she changes every day throughout the year without any duplicates. Therefore she has the reputation of being a master of female practitioners. Even the mother-in-law of Lu Kaishan of AI Zhou admitted that she was really not more caring than Yu Rui in this matter. Someone once went to Tianyu Cave to steal wine and was caught. The thief saw Yu Rui and began to beat his chest and feet. First he said that Rui's sister changed her dress and almost couldn't recognize it. Then he was heartbroken and said no. Knowing which one is said to have suffered 1,000 swords, dare to say that a woman who cultivates well is not as good as a good marriage, and a good marriage is not as good as a good birth. I'm so mad because my sister Rui married well, gave birth to a son well, practiced better at home and looked the best. Finally, my sister Rui seems to have a thicker dress today. The end of the game can be imagined. Directly open the mountain gate array, close the Tianyu Cave, close the door to fight the dog. Yu Rui's son, one of the 10 young candidates for heatstroke in Shu, has long traveled alone in the colorful world, and built a transcendent platform over there, which is an admirer of Su Zi. Like Wu Shuangjiang, he admired Lu Qi's graceful poems, while Taoist lovers are natural but they love Su Zi's poems. In addition, Su Jun made a special trip down the mountain with the Taoist couple Chaoga, went to Huainan County to find Yuan Ying, and asked when he would meet Lu Qi. Yuan Tianfeng of the Qin Tianjian in the capital of Dali, the book he read when he burned incense was also Su Zi's poems. As for the person who is hailed as, the moon will only come after the white also, there are countless supporters up and down the mountain. Zhou Xian smiled and said, it's okay, at least the end will be much better than the anti-Li Kai. She is good friends with Li Kai of Dukping Jianhu and Taisho Yuanjun Liu who is in the same line of Luzhou Beiju. It's just that Li Kai and Zhou Xian, who are close-tempered, don't like each other. Yu Rui only dared to complain in his heart. If Mr. Jing made the move, I believe that senior sister would not have been so injured. Zhou Xian stared, don't bother me. A secluded mountain top far away from the tattoo, Han Qiao hurriedly put away her escape technique, stopped Yu Feng's figure and said in amazement, why come, brother? It turned out that Jing Juzhong appeared by the cliff, looking at a large sea of golden clouds under the sun. Han Qiaosei fell down, stood beside her senior and smiled, is you worried about Gukan's safety? Jing Juzhong said calmly, if you are worried I will show up on the bamboo forest. Han Qiaosei is not surprised at this. Used to it. Brother's not weird. Han Caius asked, what did the brother do here? Brother is definitely not a person who likes to join in the fun, let alone do it too much. Jing Juzhong glanced in the direction of Tueshan, because I made a promise with someone before, but now it seems that there is no need to help. Han Qiao color screamed, anyway he couldn't understand what the brother was saying. If Gu Kan and Fu Su were present I guessed the answer. For example, with whom to promise and who to help. Since I've met the brother halfway, Gu Kan has nothing to do with her. The open mountain disciples and the closed-door disciples all rushed to the weird battlefield, but the senior brother still stopped here, it must not be too dangerous. Han Caius readily uprooted an ancient pine by the cliff and threw it towards the sea of clouds, jokingly, I heard that the wild world is over there, and I am willing to use 3 ascended realms for seniors. Jing Juzhong smiled and said, so many? Han Kosa asked, what's going on at the Great Wall of Jianqi? She noticed a slight vision over there but it was too far away. Jing Juzhong gave the answer. Boss Sword Fairy has taken out his sword, and one sword killed one of the executioners of the ancient high-ranking gods. But the latter is more like an initiative to return home in order to escape the cage. Han Qiaosa kept raising his sleeves, peeling huge pieces of gravel from the cliff, smashing into the sea of clouds for fun and said casually, since Qin Qing is so invincible, even if he couldn't kill Tueshan Grand Ancestor he would chop a few old ones. The throne is good too. Jing Juzhong said indifferently, don't say too much if you don't have a brain, it's easy to be really brainless. Han Qiaosa's cultivating aptitude of course has some, otherwise she would not have made a great aspiration in her early years to cultivate the 10 avenues of Baidi City. Only in the eyes of Jing Juzhong, the senior brother and apprentice, Han Qiaosei can only be an influential gourd painter, unable to turn many Taoisms into his own use. Apart from dabbling in hundreds of schools, he traces the origins of the source, because she doesn't understand that although the so-called knowledge is different, it will always be the same, and she doesn't know how to build on the old ways of the predecessors, so she only learns 10 methods so slowly. Han Kosa cautiously said, brother, can you ask you something disrespectful? Jing Juzhong said, Lu Shen. The path of practice of Bai Yujing's 3 masters is almost close to the main road and there is no trace to be found. And the Saints of Rites by Yujing the Master Teacher Yudo and Sui Qigong Wu Shuangjiang. These great monks, after all, still have rules and laws to follow when doing things. Lu Xian is different. Between heaven and earth, everything has its own master. The 14 realms are in harmony with the right time, the right place, and the right people, which means that you have a certain incomplete one, but a great path can barely revolve in an orderly manner. It's just the illusion that this kind of thing in me are endless, or the weather is too small and not real enough. The cultivator pursues immortality and tries to live with the world. This is a rebellious behavior. The gas trainer is like a thief who crosses the wall and crosses the border. Then he falls into the grass and takes a place. When the robber who takes the world, and the world will finally become a gluttonous glutton with infinite Taoism, but only in and out. It is extremely difficult to break this yoke. In contrast, Lu Qian has been pursuing the real road from the beginning. Han Kaiasi said solemnly, "Then I will stay away as long as I see him in the future, and I will never provoke him." After she got the answer, she was really surprised. I really didn't expect Lu Qian to have such a high evaluation in the mind of the senior. Xing Juzhong said, "You can afford to provoke Lu Xian?" Han Qiao is silent. Xing Juzhong means not only that the realm of the two sides are very different, but the true original meaning is that even if you provoke Lu Qian to death, it is meaningless. Lu Qian is not rare to take care of you. Han Qiao said timidly, "Brother, there are 2 more methods. It is really difficult to enter the room. Making a big wish is not a trivial matter. Once Han Qiaosa can't fulfill her wish, she can only stop in the fairyland in this life, so that she is destined to be unable to break the bottleneck and enter the soaring, thunderous avenue bottleneck, a nailed soldier." Solution ended. Xing Juzhong remained silent. Han Kozai sat on the edge of the cliff and said helplessly, "Brother, I have not begged you for anything, right? This is the only thing. You help me. I have been stagnant in the fairyland for too long. Life is limited. I am true. I don't want to die, and I don't want to be reincarnated and reincarnate. Like Fu Su, he looks infinitely beautiful on the surface but actually looks pitiful. I don't want to be Fu Su in the eyes of the second outsider in Baidi City." Xing Juzhong suddenly said a headless speech. "Learning without thinking will lead to failure. It's not that you, Han Qiaosa, have read a lot of books. You must know a lot. You have just become a bookstore that puts text on hold temporarily. Growing knowledge through reading does not mean increasing wisdom." Han Qiao color was stunned, then put her head in her hands, wailed and screamed. Senior brother said that doesn't mean he didn't say it. Xing Juzhong lowered his head and glanced at Han Qiaosa. Han Qiaosa immediately stopped yelling gaffes and stopped yelling. She sniffed, feeling aggrieved. Xing Juzhong smiled. The method of cracking lies in the commentary and exegetically collection of Baidi City. Han Qiao's eyes lit up. Xing Juzhong said, "There are not many books, just over 300,000, so you can read it slowly." Han Qiaosa fell back and started kicking. Xing Juzhong said suddenly, "You immediately return to Baidi City and read more books on war. If you are lucky enough to have some experience, you will soon get a surprise." Han Qiao color screamed, "Brother, you don't need to ask the reason, just do it." Xing Juzhong sat aside, clenched his fists with both hands and gently placed them on his knees, raising his eyes and looking into the distance. The sea of clouds slowly separated as he was split by a sword. Han Qiaosa didn't dare to disturb the brother's Taoism, sat up obediently and turned to look at Xing Juzhong. "Can't tell whether he is a heavenly man of the 14th realm or a legendary god." Xing Juzhong smiled and said, "Zhou's last chess game hidden in the world is complicated and difficult to find. The Great Wall of Sword Qi." Wei Jin began to refine the few strands of pure sword intent inherited from Zongyun. Chao Jun didn't really envy the chance of Wei Daijiangxian of Fengshui Temple. Anyway, with the left, right Wei Jin and Qin Ping gone, at least one of them is dominant, that is, they are older. So I have already looked away the older ones, let the younger ones. Chao Jun raised his spirit. As an elder who was a few years old, he helped Wei Jin defend the way. For the immortal master of the foreign country who was lucky enough to visit the site of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the previous scene was eye-opening and thrilling. I only felt that the expense of the fairy god's money was really not worth mentioning. First, as high as a mountain suddenly rose from under the earth, holding a sharp blade and approaching the city head in an invincible posture. An old man appeared afterwards, gathering the pure sword intent between heaven and earth, and beheaded the with just one sword. Then it didn't take long for the old man to turn into a sword light. It seemed that he had traveled far away in the wild and no trace was seen in a moment. After some discussion, I realized that the old man was the backbone of the Great Wall of Sword Qi Qingqingdu, the oldest person in the world and the highest kendo. One group of traveling monks who deliberately stayed away from the Wei and Jin dynasties came from a Baibezu sect, near the west coast. The mountain only accepts Falu monks. Recently they have made a list of the Haoran sect, of course, to raise their status. After all, Haoran Zhou Xian, the other two continents of South Pasua and Ao Pingchao were also badly injured, one dying and the other, and logically speaking the status of the sect, which had almost no loss of its heritage, was of course much higher. At this time, more than a dozen people stayed near the end of the city to enjoy the scenery, took out some drinks and fruits and chatted while eating. Someone whispered, "Since Qin Qing has such a high level of swordsmanship, he is still alive and he can still play swords. Back then the Great Wall of Sword Qi, how come he fell so quickly? Could it be that they deliberately released the water? The raging disaster leads to the awe-inspiring world?" Someone nodded in agreement. It is possible. The last hermit, Zhou Xian, led the two sword immortals Luo Shan and Zhuan to defect to the barbaric together, the gatekeeper of the upside-down mountain, the great sword fairy Zhang Lu, and the influx of the barren world into the upside-down mountain, even more, let alone these are nothing. It's a secret. As for the two, look at the Great Wall of Jianxi and Haoran, it's even more an open fact. Is it true that Jianxi Great Wall deliberately did it to make Haoran more dead? An old Yuanying's protector glanced into the distance and reminded, "There are outsiders, so you need to be careful. Then speak with your heart." More than 10 genealogists continue to discuss this matter. It's just that they don't know one thing at the moment: their heartfelt words, in the ears of the two monks among the group of people, are actually just talking with a loud voice. The mountains closest to the gods in the world are the ancestors of the soldiers in the world. And the ancient gods are really familiar with the aspirations of future generations of Qi practitioners. In addition to the ancestral court of the Chinese soldiers, there are 4 other hills similar to the Xia Zone, namely the martial arts in Luxiazu, Jiamatai in Nampo Suazhou, and Fengshua Temple and Jinwu Mountain in Aquarius. Is collectively referred to as Lintai Mountain Temple, and among them the martial arts is the most famous, so that the martial arts who mix the rivers and lakes in the mountains are called the people of the martial arts. 5 people in the distance just from Jinwu Mountain in Aquarius. Ma Kushuan, Uncle Yu Shiwu. The maid's number, the disciple of the mountain who forgets the ancestor, is both a trainer and a pure martial artist. There is also a close disciple who has been confiscated by Ma Kushuan for a long time. He is a young man with a hatchet hanging from his waist. In order to pick up the leaks, Ma Kushuan chose a restaurant to drink in a small county town north of Xingyang Mountain that did not open Jingguashuiyu. Because Yu Shiwu said that this was Ma Kushuan's only opportunity, Qin Pingan might be in Xingyang Mountain. Over there he lost his sword repair status. Before, at the entrance of Dadu Temple near the Dali companion capital, I met Qin Pingan, and it was my time to dissuade Ma Kushuan from fighting. The result is no result both times. When Ma Kushuan went to Jinwu Mountain just now, he actually had to call Yu Shiwu as his uncle ancestor. He is really of an amazingly high seniority. I don't know what's going on. They are all the uncle of Jinwu Mountain's lord. Shiwu saw Jiang and Wei, 2 patriarchs of the ancestors of the Zhongtu soldiers, and only needed to call his uncle and uncle respectively. Later Ma Kushuan broke the realm quickly, and when he reached the Yupu realm he could be promoted to a seniority, so he called Yu Shiwu teacher uncle. But because Ma Kushuan has a lot of preachers in Jinwu Mountain, many of them are not low in the gods. The ancient gods called Yu Shiwu uncle or uncle, it just depends on the mood. Anyway, Ma Kushuan's reputation in Aquarius is not small, it is notoriously unreasonable. Lunatic, do whatever he wants, unscrupulous and act with the slightest sophistication of anyone. He is also one of the 10 young candidates in the world. Su Bai and Chun Qing from Middle-earth have been provoked by him when they traveled in Aquarius. Su Bai directly surrendered and was given him by Ma Kushuan. In the evaluation of waste, Chun Qing started his hand and finally met Ma Kushuan, who was not serious, and Chun Qing was injured not lightly. As for the 10 young people named by Ao Pingzhou, Ma Kushuan is still the well-deserved number 1 in addition to Xia Ling, Lu Baqiao, Jiang Yun, Zhou Sui Yu and others. And was hailed as the Li Tuanjing third spare time because of the low level of the relationship at the time, coupled with not many shots on the battlefield, only 1 continent alternate. Therefore, Aquarius' perception of Ma Kushuan is more complicated. It not only discusses this person's domineering, but also has to admit that there is a Ma Kushuan in Aquarius, who is better able to hold the front door. Ma Kuxuan glanced at the group of spectators in the distance, so he was too lazy to take a look, turned his head and teased with Yu Shiwu. You are the third Li Tuanjing, don't you go and talk to Li Tuanjing second? 30 years ago, Li Tuanjing was second, saying that the Fengxue temple repaired the Wei and Jin dynasties. However, this was a saying that the Wei and Jin dynasties had made before entering the Five Realms. The first fairyland sword repairman in Aquarius Island. Naturally, no one mentioned it again. Because he has been practicing in Jinwu Mountain since he was a child. Yu Shiwa's orthodox lineage of course belongs to military monks. However, he is still a swordsman and more concealed. Yu Shiwu is still in the martial arts. This in Jinwu Mountain is a secret that is listed as the first-class prohibition by the Patriarch Hall. Yu Shiwu was also described by Ma Kuxuan as the half-friend in Half of Friends. He is now in charge of 3 martial arts, 2 of which were previously precarious. The ancestor of the Chinese military strategist received a nod from the Confucian temple. Jiang and Wei, the ancestors of the Chinese military strategist, gave him 2 martial arts. A total chop, 1 divided into 5. Yu Shiwu is still 2 times short. Unfortunately, there are still the last 2 copies left. Ma Kuxuan tut and exclaimed, I lost it so soon. This sentence is good. How many years has the Great Wall of Jianqi defended? 1 corner of the land, 1 city to fight the world. Just such a big place. It is not as big as the territory of a small vassal country in Jiuzhou. But afterwards, how long did it take to lose the awe-inspiring 3 continents and rivers? Ma Kuxuan no longer thinks about the Great Wall of Jianqi and has no affection for that fellow young hermit, and he really has no face to say such things. The young man with hatchet turned his head and looked at Master Ma Kuxuan. Obviously the young man was also a little confused. Since that Qin Qing is so invincible with swordsmanship, why didn't he use his sword a few more times? According to those Shanshui Dibao, Qin Qing seemed to only hand out a sword symbolically, and then he didn't make another move. In the end he just opened the way with a sword. Escort Fei Xingcheng to today's colorful world. Ma Kuxuan pressed the young man's head and twisted it to Yu Shiwu. Master is not free, let Yu Nag explain to you. Yu Shiwu explained it patiently. Before the final battle officially kicked off, Qin Qingdu, respected as the eldest sword fairy, actually handed a sword to the great ancestor of Tuyue Mountain. Although the battlefield where Jianxiu confronted the wild monster clan, it seemed calm, but in fact the thousands of miles of mountains and rivers somewhere in the wild world were all broken. This is the rogue of the whole world of Tuyueshan Dezu Hadao. Yu Shiwu stood on the top of the city and said with emotion, a trade such as fishermen fishing, woodcutter chopping wood, merchants earning money, and sword repair at the Great Wall of Sword Qi is pure, that is, killing monsters with swords. Ma Kuxuan finally intervened. There are still people doing an autopsy, the executioner beheading, and the coffin shop waiting for the dead. Yu Shiwu glanced at Ma Kuxuan, who immediately raised his hands to signal that Yu Shiwu would continue to chatter. In addition, in their place, for example, Qin Shi and Qi Tingji, in addition to being an old sword fairy with lettering, are also the heads of the 2 families. Each needs to plan a retreat for the family. The hermit Qin Pingon needs arrange troops in the Summer Palace to exchange their own minimal battle losses for the greatest battlefield merits. The old sword fairy needs to help the entire Great Wall of Sword Qi so that the incense will not be cut off. Under the premise that the Great Wall of Sword Qi cannot be held, all divisions in addition to their duties, the sword immortals' surrender of life and death and handing swords to the wild world is to protect as many kendo seeds as possible and be able to take root in the colorful world. In this way, it is tantamount to delaying time for the Howren world. There are some deeper inside stories and truths which I haven't said for the rest of the time. Some secrets such as when Haizhou's and Ruanxiu's ascent to the sky, and the entire Jinwu Mountain, I am afraid that only Yu Shiwu and Ma Kuxuan know about it, and even the suzerain is still kept in the dark. In Yu Shiwa's view, Qin Qingdu, the great ancestor of the wild, is thorough. The 3 parties have their own needs: save the Ascension City, conquer the vast world, and pursue self-topping. The strong is able to put hope into action and become a reality. Young Gao Ming squinted at the genealogical masters who didn't know where they came from and asked, Lao Ma, Uncle Yu, are these gods on the mountain stupid? I don't like calling master but like calling Ma Kuxuan an old horse. His brother Wangzu never dared to do this. Yu Shiwu smiled and said nothing about it. Ma Kuxuan squatted at the head of the city, gnawing, why insult a fool? Before in the town's hometown, if Qin Pingon in Nipping Lane is a bad broom star, then Ma Kuxuan in Xinghua Lane is the fool in the eyes of his peers. One is annoying, the other is regarded as a fun to understand. Ma Kuxuan smiled and said, Uncle Yu, go break with that group of people, the conversation is broken, I'm easy to beat people. I'm very bored along the way and have some fun. Recommended. App is really good, it is worth installing, after all you can cache books and read them offline. Yu Shiwu remained indifferent. Ma Kuxuan squatted on the ground, patted the top of the city and said, Don't talk about it, do you deserve this city head under our feet? Yu Shiwu thought for a while and really went to make sense anyway, idle is idle. Don't mind how many people die in Howren, and deliberately letting Howren die in the world are two completely different things. Except that old Xianxia is an isolated case. After fighting on the battlefield, he later blocked the advancement of the barbaric monster army in Fuyao and Jinjiazu. In addition, none of the sword immortals of the upper 5 realms left, especially since there were many other immortal swordsmen repairing. It was not impossible to leave, and they stayed on the battlefield in the end. Among the old sword immortals, Dong Sanging, Qin Shi, Nalan Burning Wei, inside the great sword immortal Zhou Tumi, Mihu, Jinqing. As for the sword immortals who died in battle, more. At that time, in Feixingcheng, the highest realm was the nascent infant realm like Ningyao, so there was such a release under the sky. Yu Shiwu has been patiently talking a lot. But no matter what Yu Shiwu said, the other party was just staring at one thing, so why didn't Qin Qing pass another sword? Yu Shiwu was a little helpless, will only stare at one person forever. Hang 1 out of 10,000, this is just a self-effacement. The horse was too bitter and happy, geared up and brought a group of people to Yu Shiwu. The young man with a hatchet on his waist complained, Uncle Yu, explain something to some fools. Ma Kuxuan chuckled and said, The fool says you are wrong, there is always his reason. Then Ma Kuxuan added, Let's not persuade you to nag, he is a good gentleman, there is always a set of wrong things such as they don't understand, but I still didn't explain it. Few young people from the small town of Lizhu Dongtian who can't speak. In addition, Ma Kuxuan's family learning is not so good. Ma Kuxuan Li Huai Gu Can. Only in this matter the 3 have a natural advantage. Yu Shiwu sighed, I'll leave it to you, remember not to be too heavy, now the Confucian temple is strictly controlled. Yu Shiwu left alone and handed the group of people to Ma Kuxuan. Life is a book with no words. There are many ups and downs, just like putting a sack in a sack where you don't understand, there is no chance to return the book to find out why. Of course, the immortal master AI Aizhou is not in this list. Ma Kuxuan suddenly heard an unexpected voice. Don't interrupt the Xianxia, the rest is whatever. Is the Confucian who sits in the sky to accompany the saints, he show. On the Golden Arch Bridge, 3 supreme gods of the new heaven are standing beside the railing carefully, and Wan Xiu is standing on the railing. Only Li Zhen is lying on his stomach still thinking about those 2 issues. That one, what did you think of that year? How did the battle between water and fire that led to the collapse of the old heaven come about? Zhou Mi smiled and said, At the beginning, for the sake of more incense in the world, I used more to temper the gods and gold bodies. But when the number of human races reached an astronomical number, the water who had traveled far away for a long time returned to the old heaven and finally realized that the world there is something wrong. Because above the earth, the light is shining, and the lights of people's hearts are continuously gathering like a sea of fire. The long river of time held by the water is like being cut out of a large area, and the fire is getting more and more intense. You can regard it as the ancient of fire walks the water. Li Zhen stared at the world with wide eyes and said in amazement, I can't see it, so why can't I even see you see? Looking down on the world, he can only see the gathering of spiritual energy on the earth. The stars, bright or dark, each light is a monk of different levels, and there is also a flow of luck. Human race looks to the sky and the galaxy is shining. In fact, the gods overlook the earth, which is a similar picture. That you see is a new water at any rate. There is no reason to not see this circulation that belongs to his natal avenue. Wan Xiu said, Because I don't let you see.